Hopefully we're live.
Yes, ideally.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello everyone. This is Steven Stutts. He occasionally shows up on these streams. Really cool guy. Great to have around in a pinch, etc., etc., etc. I don't know if he needs any introduction. Of course, the video software isn't doing all that, or rather Discord is screwing up again. So would you please cycle your camera yet another time?
Sure.
I may need to actually turn my camera off. Yep, it still ain't working.
My video connected went to red. I wonder if it's my Wi-Fi.
It could very well be. But anyhow, I can still hear you.
Well, that's a good sign. It should eventually. Let me check. I'll go to YouTube and see how it looks from a third person perspective.
Well, it's now not looking bad at all, so I wouldn't recommend doing anything different. Like, don't use any additional bandwidth unless you want to look and see like what my facial expressions were 15 seconds ago. If you happen to get a better Wi-Fi connection, though, I'll be able to go and turn my video back on. Because I know it's an awful lot nicer to be able to see the person you're talking. Whatever, I'll just turn my video on anyway. Nope. As soon as I turn on my camera, your picture starts
messing up.
Yeah.
As soon as you turn off your camera?
As soon as I turn on my camera. As soon as I turn it on in Discord.
Interesting. Well, this is fine, I guess.
Would you please cycle it just one more time?
Sure.
Thanks. I'm sorry, dear viewers, for the
technical difficulties.
Technical difficulties, yes. Alright. Well, hopefully that works. I'm not going to send any more Discord messages. I'm just going to leave everything that way and hope that it remains functional. Let's see who happens to be watching. I think that might be you.
I'm not watching it right now.
Oh, well, in that case, we have a viewer.
Right.
Hello, viewer. Whoever you happen to be, welcome. And hello, everyone else who happens to be watching this after the fact. Welcome to CSC, where there are all sorts of sacred cows to cull, and all sorts of time to do it.
Yeah, well, exactly.
We actually do try to pursue the good, the true, and the beautiful by systematically pushing the limits of taboo thought around here.
One thing. Okay, so this reminds me.
Have at it.
Me and my roommate and someone from my high school, we were talking about certain high school teachers, you know, that particularly ones that I didn't get along with very well, and not the topic of conversation wasn't directed like, okay, let's talk about teachers we don't like, but it just happened to be these teachers that I didn't like, and so there's this one teacher that he's physics, right? So it's algebra-based high school physics. I just was put in the class. I didn't sign up for it. I was just there, like. If I want to learn, if I'm going to go out and learn physics, I want to ideally, I think, pursue calculus-based. As far as I'm concerned, I feel like.
I mean, that's what calculus was, or at least that's what it's for. Is for explaining certain kinds of phenomena that can be explained. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And my dad always said, he's like, yeah, calculus is the language of physics. You know, it's really important. And I was like, yeah, and it makes sense, right? Like. And in calculus, you learn like first derivative, etc. You know, then you have position, velocity, acceleration, all that.
Well, I mean, if you're talking Newtonian mechanics, yeah.
Right. And so, like in that application of physics, it's very sleek, right? It's very nice. You take the derivative. Here's that. Like, it feels as though it's meant to be, you know. And then algebra-based physics. There's some times where I'm like, this is some ham-fisted shit. Like, this is just an algorithm. Like, they're like, well, it's very cumbersome and clunky, and you have to remember a lot. You have to
remember everything instead of remember nothing and derive everything.
Exactly. It's not nice.
Like literally,
so
all you need to do in Newtonian physics is conceptualize the situation, remember a few basic principles, visualize it maybe if necessary, if that's part of the conceptualization process, write down what the situation happens to be in mathematical terms, and then solve for whatever you need.
And you find exactly.
And we were allowed to, even in calculus-based physics, we were allowed to have an equation sheet. Guess who never brought one?
Oh, yeah.
It never helped.
Yeah, exactly.
Never helped.
You don't need an equation sheet.
Please do continue.
Exactly. But yeah, so this teacher, at the beginning, this is like the beginning of the year. This is his first time teaching this sort of class. This guy, so he's the science, this science guy. He was a biology teacher before, and so science teachers, expect them to, have some idea of science. You just expect that.
You'd expect somebody to be able to just pretty much go in, walk in, and read the notes for a few minutes, see where we're at, and any science teacher should be able to go and teach basically any high school science class. From, I don't know, geology through physics.
Right.
Or rather, from physics through geology. Depending on how you want to say. Yeah.
So he's he has a lot of teaching experience. He hasn't taught this class in particular, but I'm assuming. But whatever. This doesn't even have anything to do with his actual teaching or understanding of the. Well, it does have a little bit of his understanding, but so people are asking questions. I don't know. I don't know. I don't remember enough to describe the context in detail. But we're in class. It's kind of like an open discussion happening. It's not like we're learning. I don't think it was a lesson. It was kind of like introduction because it's one of the first days. And someone asks, if you're traveling the speed of light and you shine a flashlight, what happens? It's a good question. That's an interesting question. What does happen if you are traveling the speed of light? And he says, well, he thinks about it. He doesn't have an answer on the surface. He thinks about it. He's gonna figure it out. He's like, well, the light would stop. The light would stop.
Relative to you and your perspective.
He just said, he just said absolutely the light would stop. It would stop going forward.
Oh.
What basically, and I was like, okay, this sounds right on the surface, but I know my dad had talked to me about this specific thing. He read, he was reading a book about Einstein, and my dad was really interested in that part of physics in this particular moment. And so he, he's like, well, actually, to the person who's going the speed of light, the flashlight looks like it's going the speed of light, but to a bystander, it's just two things going the speed of light.
Two things going the speed of light, yes.
Right, exactly.
Where in the world is that book? I'm actually going to put a book recommendation into the description, but please do continue.
But yeah, so I understood that is actually what happens. The light doesn't just stop. It actually looks like it's going. To a bystander, it looks like it's two things going the speed of light. But to the person, it looks like they're going the speed of light. But the flashlight also looks like it's going the speed of light relative to them. It looks, they see it shoot out ahead of them. And so what he said was wrong, right? So I'm like, no, actually, what happens is I explained that to him. I'm not going to rehash it, but I explained that to him. No, and he's like, no, that doesn't make any sense. And I was like, okay, that's fair, that's reasonable. It kind of is kind of unintuitive at first, right? And I was like, well, it's not me saying this. I wouldn't have come up with this on the top of my head. This was Einstein. Einstein said this and figured this out. And it's pretty sure it's been experimentally reaffirmed in some way. And he's like, that doesn't make sense. He's like, no, that's wrong. Wrong, right? I'm like, well, it's again, you're talking to Einstein here, not me. I'm just the messenger almost. And so he's like, no. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm going to find some proof because obviously he's not going to believe my word. So I look up online, very quickly find something experimental evidence from the Pew Research Center, and so I find an article describing all about it, like what this exact situation. I'm like, okay, cool. Let me like raise my hand and I'll read this little paragraph, a little excerpt. Like it would probably take 20 to 30 seconds for me to read this, and it would be done and we'd be fine. And so I raised my hand. I'm like, hey, can I read this? I said it to him. Can I read? He knew what I was going to ask about, right? When he called on me, I said, can I read this excerpt from the Pew Research Center, like about that phenomena? They have experimental evidence. He's like, no, you can't. I was like, I instantly lost all respect for him and wanted to I was very upset, right? Because I'm not upset because he disagrees, right? I don't give a shit what this guy thinks. Like, it doesn't matter to me. But I was upset that he's sitting in front of the class teaching people something wrong.
Class.
Yes, a science class. Teaching supposed to be teaching people, says something wrong because he's just guessing. He doesn't actually know what's going on. Like, he's just assuming, like, with very basic logic, what would happen when it's not what happens. It doesn't behave like this. Just guesses, and then when sort of confronted with evidence against that, he's not going to. Oh, actually, guys, I'm wrong.
Oh no!
It does this. No, he's going to say that his ego matters way more than everyone else's understanding and everyone else's, And so,
Exactly.
He's like, so I was like, screw this guy. And so, for example, I lost all respect for him. And the class was stupid. I mean, the class was super bad. Like, it's algebra-based physics. It was moving at a snail's pace. We weren't doing anything. I was learning nothing. I dropped it at semester. I was like, screw this. The waste of my time. I'd rather go home early. It was my last period, and I'm a senior, so I can just go home
early, and even if you have to mow the lawn, it'll be...
Yeah. Oh, much more stimulating. Literally, But, so yeah, so... this sort of thing, this guy, this is also the teacher who said that the ACT was unfair because, for example, on two separate ACT tests, one of them you could miss, for example, on the math section. You miss one question and you get a 35. On a different test, you could miss one question and still get a 36 because it's a hard math section. Yeah, because it's harder, so less people... they're comparing you to other people, right? They're not comparing you to...
Yeah, the score that you get is actually based upon a percentile distribution. A certain percentage of people get a certain score, period.
Exactly. And people's performance on tests is quite consistent. If you have a large population of people, you get you can get these nice scores. And
people are...
So a 35 score one day is going to score 35 another day, very likely, because...
Or at least, 34, 35, 36, whatever. Basically, if at one point you score above a 34, on a good day, you can get a 36, and on a bad day, you might get a 33. On a really bad day, you might get a 33.
But because of the way, we have stable performance, people do, and when compared to a large population, we generally fall in the same place, regardless. Even if the populations are different, if they're large enough, people are, we're homogenous enough that it's consistent. So if we made it to where, you miss one question, then it would be way because if you, for example, got a harder test, you're just going to score worse. That literally is what that means. You would just score worse.
That would mean everyone in 2012 might get lower ACT scores than everyone in 2011, might get lower ACT scores than everyone in 2016 or whatever.
Exactly. You'll have different... Literally, the averages of the tests would be different, and it would be a whole... it would be a mess. This guy's no.
Well,
that's unfair.
But I would tend to have a qualitative and a quantitative aspect. If I were to do standardized testing, I would rework it. I would have each question categorized in multiple aspects, and then do a multivariate analysis to give an idea of how this person does on more than just general areas. And then I would go and have each student get a personalized score report that talks about, okay, if basically someone does really well on a problem that uses A, B, and C, and bombs something that uses B, C, and D, then that means we'll know that, well, this person knows A, B, and C, and doesn't know D.
Yeah, exactly.
Or generally, especially if you wind up having lots of data points with lots of problems with lots of related information.
Right.
And then you wind up having
figure out where.
Yeah, and then you like assign people. You write questions that test A, B, C, and D. You write questions that test E, F, G, and H. You write questions that test B, C, D, and E, and so on.
Exactly.
And then you just wind up getting this panel of questions. You take a 6-hour test, and maybe even over the span of 2 days, or like a morning test and an afternoon test, or whatever. Don't have an SAT and ACT. Just have like one company administering one test that says, okay, this is for high school. This is for general 12th grade level stuff. This is for like what one would expect going into college. And then you can go and send the score reports. I mean, it doesn't cost anything. Like you could literally just send the report for free to every single university in existence.
Yeah.
And then they can say, okay, this is the profile of what the student can and cannot do.
Yeah.
And,
or even without sending to universities, you could have like sort of a database that all universities have access to, and only and then they can, when they're trying to accept a student, then they okay, this student.
And then you could have like the people
or whatever,
and
then pop up.
Yeah, then you could have people, for instance, in the department. Like, it wouldn't have to necessarily be the people in only the admissions department. You could go and say, okay, the person in charge of X kind of research who's looking to have certain kinds of students in his classes and doesn't want to have other kinds of students can go and say, hey, why don't we admit these few people that might be interested in this particular track. Go and give them conditional admission that, okay, if you go and specifically come to study analytical chemistry, then you'll get in and get some semblance of a scholarship or what have you.
Yeah, there you go. That's a great idea. Like, it would, and for example, then composite scores would, the full scale score would not matter quite as much in certain circumstances. If someone's like really good at one thing, or a specific area, then when they go to that area, in college, they can see that, hey, like, they're good at this, even if they're bad at X, at least Y is they're good at.
And then it would allow you going into university to have an idea that, okay, well, if certain degrees and like there's like 100 different areas or something, and certain departments care about certain areas and certain other departments care about other areas. I mean, it wouldn't even need to be 100. I don't know exactly how many. Like, if you have like English, and then you could separate it into different eras of literary history. You could separate it into, how good is this person grammatically? How good is this person at conveying whatever you might want to go.
At understanding as well, right? Yeah.
Then you could go and say, okay, well, that means that this person in our program could skip over these courses and would need to go and take the baby versions of these courses and could take the normal person versions of these courses, and so they could get a personalized education starting from the freshman year.
Yeah, exactly.
And, I mean, you might have somebody who would be all ready to jump to junior level, junior level science or junior level math or something, that would need to be put into not even a course that starts with 1, but a course that starts with 0, like 086 or 099 English or whatever, because he never learned how to do that. But he wouldn't be denied admission. He could just go into the easy English course to learn basic things like paragraph structure and how to coherently and cogently convey an idea, etc. And then he wouldn't run into those sorts of problems because he could have his educational needs more closely addressed by the program he's going into, rather than assuming a strictly homogenous entering class and even attempting to shoehorn people at the higher education level.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And yeah, and honestly, you could design a test like that. That would be quite long, and even maybe it would even be a multiple day thing where you like, okay, we're going to do this section this day, and etc. But very comprehensive and gives you lots of feedback. Like that's getting more data and more feedback and more organization, etc. Like, does that ever like? Are you ever like, God, I wish I hadn't done more trials? Like, gosh.
Well, I mean,
Unless,
some people can have analysis paralysis, but then you can go and, of course, make the situation better. Hello, Dylan. It's very good to see you. And so you could just say, well, okay, this department doesn't need to know about these things or doesn't want to know about these things, and so they could opt out of certain pieces of information.
Yep.
You know, but if you have the repository available, might as well have it actually be thorough.
No, for sure.
And then it could evolve over time. You could realize that, oh, well, people in the humanities department would prefer having this kind of information, and people in the physics department would prefer having that kind of information, and then they could go and make requests to the exam companies, and the exam companies could then deliver.
Yeah, there you go. Like, that would be great. That, and so, but you can see, obviously, if we think about what like my teacher's saying. So, we went from that, we came up with a great idea for a test, right? Like, this is wonderful. No, he's like, no, but a test like that is great. But then what happens when you're dealing with people who think curving a test or think putting a test on a curve makes it unfair,
Well, here's the thing. I don't know. It really depends on the needs of the test, because ultimately, I would say, the shiniest of turds is still a turd, right?
Oh, well, yes, of course.
And the most unpolished of silver is still silver. Like, you can't.
Very true.
It's like you can't completely discount certain things. You just can't.
Right. That's true.
So I have never. I mean, I've from the perspective of performing well, I've always liked curves.
Yes.
But from the perspective of actually going for 100% mastery of the material, I think that curving an exam is dumb.
Correct.
Assuming that you actually have an exam that's fair for testing what it claims to test.
Agreed. But
like, I wouldn't go and administer an 8-hour test and expect everyone to finish it in an hour and a half without curving it.
Right. Well, of course, right. But while curving, I agree that curving can definitely sometimes be like not optimal. I don't think
it doesn't categorically make something unfair.
Unfair.
Either.
I would never say curving is unfair. I was like, well, it's inherently, it's comparing people to people. Like, it's inherently. I mean, maybe one person had a horrible situation and they had a concussion right before the test, and it's unfair for them. But that's them. Like, that's a very specific thing, right? Like, curving in essence.
Okay, but let's say what happens. Like, yes, it can be unfair in some circumstances. Let's say the class is good, the teacher's good, and everybody gets an A-level understanding of the material. Then they go and they take an exam that's put on a curve, and the average score you get is a C. No.
Yeah, that's bad.
And that's why
it's not unfair because everyone's subjected to the same one, but it's bad.
Exactly. Because it doesn't actually. If the point of passing a course means demonstrating competence, then what you're doing is the person that gets a 92 instead of a 93 might be on the failure cutoff point, and that wouldn't necessarily be good. If someplace else that would be viewed as an A.
Right. Yes, that would not make sense.
I'm all for liberal use of pass-fail courses, but with very high marks required to pass.
Right. Yeah. And
I mean, in any school that I would run, you would have the option of taking a pass-fail course where the like any course. Don't know if I would want to have A, B, C, D, F, but you would have but in every course you would have like a numeric score. I would eschew the letters, and then have pass or fail, and then you could, as a teacher, use your prerogative. You use what you know about the subject to say, okay, this person clearly knows what he's talking about, but has certain kinds of problems. And then you could have a little box for the instructor to say, this person passed the course because of his understanding, but needs to work on keeping his minus sign straight, or needs to work on this. And then or you could have contingent passing. It could be like, okay, this person has failed the course. However, I gave him these additional things that are outside the scope of the normal course to force him to learn to input things correctly into his calculator or not make stupid errors with minus signs or whatever. And contingent upon completing this extra material, he'll pass the course. Like being able to give teachers that leeway to be able to help their students throughout the course and beyond, to actually ensure that the institution gives good education. I would say just take as much power out of the hands of the administrators as possible and give it to the people that actually know the subject, and then hire good people. I know it's probably a very tall order to fill, but the fact of the matter is that kind of an environment will attract the good ones. You just pay them well, you let them do their job, and you stay out of their way.
Yeah, no, of course.
Like, good teachers do not need their hands held. You can say, I'll get you any resources that you need. You have a budget for teaching.
Good teachers don't do much hand holding themselves either.
No. Wait, no. When I teach people, the way that I do things is sit back, watch, observe, get an idea of what's going on when seeing somebody working through problems or working through whatever they need to do, and then going through in kind of a Socratic way and get people to solve their own problems.
Yes.
My goal in teaching is to render myself obsolete. That's why my rates are so high. My rates are high because people, once they come to me, don't come back as often as would people that might go to somebody else. That generates dependency.
Right. Exactly.
Now, certainly, you might wind up having people coming twice. That does tend to happen, but that's in a completely different realm where somebody might need a complete reset or a different reframing of whatever it is, and you do the reframing. It's like, okay, I know now what I have to do in order to move forward, and then they do it.
Exactly.
And then it's more just a question of, making sure that people stay on track, kind of helping them make sure that their goals are in line with what they want, and their plans are in line with achieving their goals, and then they do the heavy lifting. They do it because it's their life and they care about it. And if it's not something they care about enough, well, then maybe they should be rethinking what they are doing. Or maybe they should be going and finding some motivation. Like, I will motivate people, but I'm not going to go and invent motivations. They're going to have to be the ones to know what actually matters to them, and I can help them go and see if, is this going to be significant in your life? Is this going to somehow help you? And if it is, well then, okay, buddy, you better do what you need to do. It's very important.
Yeah, when I teach, for example, basically, like, for like a standardized test like the ACT, I'll let them just work through problems, sit through them. I'll work through the problems with them. I'll take a test alongside them, and then at the end, we both check over our own answers, see what we got wrong and right, and then they go. Then we go through each problem that they got wrong, and essentially, I'm like, okay, so you generally most of the time I got that problem right, so I'll know what happened, and I usually most of the time actually I know looking at the problem I'll know what answer they picked and why they picked it and why they were doing the wrong. What was wrong about how they were
that's actually
thinking.
part of what makes taking a standardized test so easy. If you know how to take standardized tests, is you can categorize
Mhm.
what kinds of wrong answers are there and why they put them there in order to try to deceive you.
Exactly. So I'll say, okay, well, look, they're trying to trick you here. Look in the question. They said which one best fits. You just picked the first one that did fit. Like this, yes, that does fit. That you could probably say that from the information given, but there's a better answer here. It fits better. They're like, oh yeah, you're right. Like that's okay.
Or
And
like
then,
where there's the sneaky not in the question stem, and then you pick exactly the opposite of the correct answer.
Yep, there's that one as well. And then sometimes it'll be a conceptual thing, and then I'll explain how I go through the problem in general, and then I'll sometimes explain some different ways you could look at it. And like for example, for like this, and then a lot of times I'll give tips on how to save time and stuff, and how you can streamline yourself, because in general, like having more time to solve problems and more time to like think generally means that obviously you'll do better, right? Like if you're not stressed, if you're not wasting time, because a lot of times people have a really wasteful approach to problems and they're getting them right or not, but the reason, and maybe the reason they're not is because they're like wasting so much effort on certain parts and messing up and
what is the
like,
yield of this next minute that I'm going to be spending?
Right.
If I can get 2 points by doing 2 problems here, or I can get 0 points by not finishing that problem there, well then I might want to go and get the 2 easy points.
Exactly. And so a lot of times, like for example, on the ACT Sciences specific, because a lot of people don't finish that and they have problems with it. I'm like, hey, one thing I figured out on a specific type of question that basically it has 3 experiments, and then you read each experiment, and usually the experiments are very thematically similar, but certain things were changed, and so they're measuring certain different variables of the same sort of situation, and it's like, now let's figure out friction. Okay, now let's figure out like
heat,
like
or
mass.
let's figure out
exactly.
Yeah, whatever.
Exactly, that sort of thing. And gradient, and then see the different. So one thing they'll have the experiments, and there's the description of the experiment, and then there's the graph, right? And there's a table or a graph that has it. And then I was like,
and it could be something really, really simple, as in like kinetic energy and height, or
right. And one thing, and one thing I figured out basically, and this is what I had done. I guess I don't know if I had done this when I had taken it when I was younger, but I actually don't think I did. I actually think I could have gone a little bit faster if I had done this. But I realized, so there's the description of the experiments, right, and all of that. But what I realized, under every experiment is a table or a graph. It's never just a paragraph. So I was like, you can just start by looking at the table, and you can figure out what the experiment
what it is that we're trying to test, because you can look at dependent and independent variables.
Yeah, you look at the independent variable, you see, and then you can look at the trends in the data really quickly.
And then if you need the context for whatever it is that you have, then you can go and skim over the problem statement to see exactly what it is they were trying to solve if it wasn't completely clear. Like if you only get a general idea from the...
Sometimes you're like, okay, maybe there was a certain condition you can't tell in the graph that they put it under. You look
or if there's like multiple tracings on the graph, it's like, okay, what's tracing 1, tracing 2, and tracing 3? Well, I guess I better read the problem.
You will save so much time doing that. Like reading, because what I would do, when I took the test, I just read every single thing in every part, and I just took, I looked at every single part of each test, so that's not the most efficient thing. It worked, but it was not very efficient, and I could have streamlined it, and it would have been better.
And I will tell you, when taking the MCAT, you pretty well need to.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
The MCAT, you need to know how to budget your time.
Right. Exactly. Same with the GMAT specifically. The GRE, it's a little bit better.
The GRE is a little easier. But
but
MCAT,
the
GMAT, LSAT, you really need to budget your time well too.
Yep, LSAT as well.
PCAT, DAT, all those you need to be really good at time management.
Yeah.
So better for you to
Yeah,
learn in the
exactly.
ACT.
Oh yeah, exactly. Learn early, and yeah, so like it'll be something like that. So when teaching, like you have to like there's so much time spent from the teacher's perspective, just figuring out like how do they approach it, what's going on in their head, how can I like improve that process that they have, while probably not eradicating it completely and rebuilding them from the beginning, but seeing, okay, hey, this is like what I'll do with my students is I'll see how they solve the problem, then I'll contrast that with how I solve the problem, and I'll see differences.
Yeah, it's
Sometimes we solve
it's a diagnostic, basically.
Yeah, sometimes we solve it in a very similar way, but I just skip out on it. I'm faster because I eliminate fluff, just like that, just like I just described. For example, we could do the same science section, and I'm finishing in like 10 minutes earlier than them, and it's because of those sorts of things, because I'm not spending as much time on the fluff. So then when a hard problem does come along, I do have plenty of time to think about it.
You go and you look, oh wow, I'm now at the point of the test where I have 8 minutes per single problem.
Yes.
To finish, and I have 4 problems left. So
and you're
wow,
just like, okay,
I can completely relax. I'm under no pressure. I can just go and look at this and focus on what I need to focus on and get it done, as opposed to at the end of the test, oh crap, I have 25 problems and I have 12 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
Better get through each of these in under half a minute apiece.
That is that's an awful place to be. And oops, one sec.
You go for easy points first.
Yeah, exactly. One thing they always say at the test are like, oh, you have 1 minute per problem. Like, that's bad information, actually. Like, no.
But yeah, technically you do.
Technically you do, yes. But that information itself, you save time on the easy problems that you can then spend later on the more difficult ones.
The 80-20 rule applies there. Quite a bit. 80% of the problems you'll be able to do in 20% of the time, and the rest of it.
Yeah.
And if you can go through, and I've actually revised my own theory on what you do. Like I used to tell people just skip over the hard ones completely. Now I don't tell people to do that anymore. I tell them to, if you see something that looks like it's going to be hard, skim over it.
Yeah.
Skim over it, so you'll have a chance to subconsciously cogitate it.
Yes, that's a really big thing. It's when you come back to problems that you've already seen that you maybe couldn't solve the first time.
You get a new insight.
You have a new insight. You're like, oh, it's this.
Or you could have a new insight in the middle of doing something else and be like, okay, I'll finish this problem. Or I'll just mark it. Quick, go back. I know what my insight is. I know how to solve this. Okay, now back to what I was doing.
As well. Oh yeah, exactly. And that'll happen to me where I'm just like, okay, I skipped the problem, but I'm subconsciously kind of working on it as I go through the other ones, and I'm thinking about it a little bit, and I'm like, oh, okay, and then there's the Eureka moment while I'm working on another problem, and
hello, back. Did I remember your name correctly? Are you Andreas? Were you Andreas? I'm not too good with names, but I think I may have remembered your name. And now, if I got it wrong, then please do correct me. So, what were you saying, Stephen?
But yeah, essentially, I had pretty much finished it up. But that's a good question. You asked me what I was saying. All I know and all I can tell you about it is that I had finished the thought. The Eureka moment, basically. Skim a problem, as you said. It's good to have like a premonition of the problem and kind of an idea of what's going on, even if you can't solve it. And then over time, it's easier. For example, think of something you might have found difficult at one point, and then you just stop doing it. You're like, God, this is. I don't want to do it anymore. And then you come back to something else.
Relax, sleep.
Come back the next day, especially after sleep. Like, so much is consolidated. And then you go to the problem, you're like, this is so easy. What the hell was I thinking about? And it would happen to me when I was younger, when I was like playing piano even. Like I would not play piano for like a month, and I'd come back to a song, and I'm like better than I was when I was playing piano. I'm like, what happened? Why am I better? Like it seems easier now. And it's like, well, like muscle memory, the sort of that stuff is consolidated, and it's my mind's like, oh, this is simple, and sometimes coming back with a fresh take just gives you so much, like you just see it, like it just makes sense, right?
Yes, and then also going back to like we were talking about standardized testing, we were talking about how it applies in a realm where you really can't escape. You're stuck there for X amount of time, and you have Y amount of problems to do. But if you're in the process of actually learning something, and you want to thoroughly learn and understand something, then you can go through the material on day one, or go through as much of it as you can, and sleep on it. Like this whole idea of consistent learning. This whole idea of consistent learning as opposed to cramming is very important.
Yes, it is. Learning.
And if you do get through the stuff that you need to early, then you can always do, because there's in lots of books, there are reference papers. Like things that you can go to for additional information to help flesh out things, give more context, and maybe even direct your studies further at some other point. And so you can go and, if you're working on a body of knowledge this big, hello Jack, good to see you. If you're working on a body of knowledge this big, but you can go and like a spider just make a web that connects it way more thoroughly to everything else, then you'll have a more seamless time integrating what you're learning into a wider framework. But you can only do that with, if you're using your body the way and your brain the way it's supposed to be used, which is, you learn, you sleep, you consolidate, you eat right, you take care of yourself. Those elements are just as important as the cognitive elements of taking a test or learning a subject or anything.
Oh yeah, no, completely. And yeah, like multiple passes through the stuff. That's like I would do this when I was cramming, but I would do it would still be, in essence, I would make a pass through everything. Like I just read through everything, try to understand it, right? Then I'll sit down a little bit, probably look at my phone, procrastinate more, and then I'll read over it again and look at more things. Something new would come up, right? Oh, okay, this makes more sense. Okay, this fits into this, and etc. And then do that. And if you do that over time, like multiple days, especially, like go through, it gives you not only, like, it helps build that big picture, like that's, I think, necessary for real understanding. It's like how everything fits together. Like not everything can be learned like linearly. Like it just can't. Like linear learning, like there are things that can just connect together and are multi-dimensional and broader. That linear going through it and just drilling it like that is going to be like a real waste of effort and a kind of an energy sink. When you can go a cursory pass through, and then it's okay. That you have the thoughts bouncing around your head. What's going on? You understand some parts, maybe not some others, and then you go through again, and more is clear. And then eventually, it's just like so clear. And then you can go teach it to someone, and it's just like ingrained in your head, and learn, and that's really important.
The old adage of "learn one, do one, teach one" is really good for obtaining mastery of a subject. If you really want to know what you're doing, if you really want to know that teach it to somebody else. And if you want to solidify it by forcing yourself to synthesize it in not necessarily completely novel ways, but in ways that are relevant to somebody else, then teaching is actually an integral part of learning.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, it's really good, and it's done really wrong like a lot of the time. So it's important, I think, to like have an idea of like proper almost etiquette as far as how to learn and how to teach and how to approach things. There's like a right and a wrong way to do things almost. Obviously, almost, because people are different and certain people will want to approach it in a slightly different way. But there's themes you can draw from that generally hold true, that if followed correctly will lead to optimal results and content mastery. So yeah, like multiple passes is a big one, and because that consolidates your learning.
And interacting with the material in different ways during your multiple passes.
Yes, exactly. and being engaged and dynamic in your approach and trying to understand each part. That's one thing I like. Recently, when I've been doing tests and stuff, is I've been trying to I've talked about on a previous stream, like the dynamic approach thing, trying to come up with new ways to do things, trying to like really strengthen my intuition of this type of problem. So when I go around another time, I'm going to be that much quicker. That sort of thing helps a lot. But, like trying to understand eventually each part of why each thing happens. If you can because this actually I'll just read one of my answers on Core that I recently had. And so someone A2A'd me. They said it's about Umar, really cool guy. But he said, he didn't ask the question, but he A2A'd. He said, "What is the difference, if any, between understanding and remembering?"
Yeah, this was what broke your hiatus from answering things on Quora.
Exactly. So
1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue.
Yes. So I'll read my answer. So I said I think there's a categorical difference between the two, but there's significant overlap. Remembering implies at least a modicum of understanding, and vice versa. If someone says that they remembered that Christopher Columbus stumbled upon the U.S. in 1492, you can assume that I switched subjects because I edited it later. I'll have to change that. That they also understand some things about the statement. I have a bulleted list. Christopher Columbus was a person. 1492 was the year that this event transpired. What he found is now known as the U.S. Note that this is not necessarily the case, but we can tacitly assume that the person relaying this fact knows the aforementioned. It wouldn't be very significant to them if they didn't, and hence their reason to remember it would go down. Now we can't assume the person who recalls this fact can recount the cultural significance of the event, how it came to be, and its effect on the indigenous populations and the rest of the world. None of this information can really be inferred from the statement itself, so the person's understanding of the event in historical context could really be quite limited, but not necessarily.
But you know enough to get a good score on a test because.
Yes.
1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and then
you go.
You have the question: exactly. What year did Columbus sail the ocean blue?
Yes.
Or if you're nasty like me, you go and you tell your friends or enemies, or people that you think are hopeless. 1495, Columbus sailed the ocean wide, and then you completely knock them for a loop.
Oh no! No. Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. Oh my goodness. Okay, so then I say in the case of something like distance formula, that is killing me. In the case of something like the distance formula, someone can easily remember it and be able to apply it without really understanding much at all about it or its relationship to the Pythagorean theorem. Furthermore, someone could understand both of these things and still not have a deep physical understanding of the Pythagorean theorem and how squares constructed from the side lengths fit together. In this case, remembering and understanding could potentially be quite discrepant, but a person with either could likely solve problems dealing with distance between 2 points without difficulties, so it may not appear to be so. As we can see, recall by itself could be backed by significant deftness pertaining to the subject matter surrounding the remembered or not. It seems hard to equate understanding and remembering, but it also doesn't seem reasonable to ignore the overlap between the two, especially in looking at the potential someone has in application of concept.
Hey,
sweetheart,
would you mind using a different internet connection like yours, please? Thanks. Could you use like the Wi-Fi on your phone? Thanks.
So so this relates. So what I had said before I said this, read this answer was trying to understand each part, and I'll sort back to the distance formula. When we were first taught the distance formula, we were just given a formula. Hey, this is the distance between 2 points.
The difference between the two x values and the difference between the two y values. You square them,
I was like,
add them together, take the square root, and there you go.
I was like, okay. I was in class. I was like, looked up at the board. Oh, that's the formula. Okay. Like, looked down on my phone. Like, I wasn't very conscious. I just took it. And then I was thinking, and it was one of those things. I'm not a good just rote memorizer with no reference. Like, I need some association. So I was like, God, I can't remember the distance formula. Like, is it minus? Is it plus in the middle? Like, I know you subtract the 2 points, but I forget what's plus and minus. Like, do I square it? And then, like, I just, it was just like. Then I was like, how would I find the distance 2 points if I would just ask that? And I was like, I was like, okay, I would draw probably a triangle and get the hypotenuse. Wait, like that's what it is. It's just the axis. You draw a triangle and then you do the Pythagorean. Oh, that makes complete sense. I've never forgotten the distance ever since I thought that. I was like, oh, no, I've never forgotten it.
And then another thing you can do, if you don't mind me bringing this up, is if you have 2 different points, there's not only one right triangle that you can make between those points. There's an infinite number of them.
Yeah.
And so that teaches you the importance of selecting a coordinate system for whatever your problem happens to be. And select the coordinate system, preferably one with orthogonal axes, because if you don't have them being 90 degrees to one another, when you're going to run up into all sorts of fun.
It's going to be annoying.
It's just, I mean, it's doable, but it's just, no! Yeah.
No! Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, you just, but you can conceptualize even just the distance formula in different ways, just by throwing a different set of axes on the entire problem and seeing, oh, well, can you solve it can you solve it now? I once gave, I don't even know, maybe it wasn't even fair. It was like a middle schooler or something who was asking me about these sorts of things, and we basically spent a good 45 minutes just looking at one single problem and just throwing different coordinate systems on it and solving it with a different coordinate system. And finally, after that, I was like, okay, here's some more problems for you to work on. Forget whatever coordinate system was there. Tell me what coordinate system you would use and why, and then solve the problem using it. Jack says he wishes he could be proficient in higher math. Well, wishing you can be proficient in higher math and becoming proficient in higher math. I mean, that wishing is step number 1.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So,
first step is wanting to.
Could you please, Stephen, put into the chat your link to Paul's online math notes?
Yes.
I don't have the link right now because I wound up deleting a lot of my bookmarks. But
all right, so I'll put it in chat. Yep, that's a great place.
When you wish upon a star, makes no difference where you are. Anything your heart desires will come to you.
If only.
Well, at least you can think of at least it makes sense to aim for your goals, right?
Yeah.
For sure. Like if you, it's like a star is a pretty. It's out there. It's definitely out there. But if you're not aiming for a star, then there's no way you're even going to go about building a rocket ship.
Yeah. No. Completely.
Well, Jack, if you're having trouble with dyscalculia, just focus on reframing the problem. Focus on getting a conceptual understanding of what's going on, and then look at how the mathematics relates to the concept. And then when you do write things down, don't skip steps. Like don't do this thing. Okay. You want to know the biggest thing that I see happening with people that have dyscalculia? It's not that it's just like people with dyslexia that can read. The reason I say this is because I know plenty of people that have dyslexia that are perfectly fine readers. It's just one of the there's something very basic that's missing. But once you get over that, often it completely ameliorates all the other problems. When it comes to math, one of the biggest things is making sure that you don't ever try to memorize your way through something.
Never.
Ever. That's just a big, gigantic no.
That's just anatomy.
Yeah, well then you kind of have to. But math, do not try to memorize. If there's something in lower level math that feels like at some point you just memorized it, then don't focus on the higher level math yet. Go back and get that one sorted out first. Go back and get that one figured out, sorted out, and squared away before you try to go on to something more complicated. The fact of the matter is, you're probably going to wind up having dyscalculia, having to put a lot of extra effort on the front end. On the very, and I don't mean front end in terms of programming, I mean front end in terms of before you see tangible results at a high level. You're going to need to put all that effort in to understanding the basic concepts. But then once you do, you will have so much more of a thorough grasp of everything that when you go and add one concept upon another at your own pace, you'll be able to integrate it into a seamless web of knowledge about the thing, as opposed to having everything being this discrete thing, that discrete thing, that discrete thing, and not having any connections between them. Now, I know I'm being very, very broad and general about this, and I'm not actually showing the exact concepts and how they link together. But I hope that you can believe me when I say I've worked with people that have dyscalculia, and it is completely possible. It's completely possible to learn math. It may be more difficult, and you definitely are probably not going to be doing it the way they teach it in school. In fact, I dare say, if I were listening to what math teachers teach in school as opposed to teaching myself math, I would have probably thought I was horrible at math.
Oh yeah, that's happened to me. I thought I was not at math, but everything, the way they taught it in school. I was like, God, I just don't get things. Like, it doesn't make sense. And then I look at, when you approach the concept from first principles yourself with just a logical outlook and try to understand why everything's happening, and you're like, oh, this makes sense. Then you look on the board, and what's funny is people without dyscalculia in high school, or I mean in school in normal, they aren't, even though they can execute the math and they're getting the problems right,
they can't go from first principles and tell you why it is.
They do not understand the math. Like they cannot do math. Maybe they can execute math. They can't actually like understand and comprehend. Like, and then you'll see that when it comes, and this will come up on like a standardized test. They can't. It'll be a simple problem that basically like will test your understanding. Okay, do you get what's going on here? And they'll flop, and they're like, "Oh, math's so hard." But it's even the people who don't have dyscalculia, like if they don't approach things correctly, even if they can execute it correctly, are actually they're no better off themselves. So it really is important to like have your own conceptual outlook on things and realize where with dyscalculia you'll have trouble with the numbers specifically. I feel like dealing with the very numerical basics, but if you can somehow link those the numbers to the conceptual framework, and if you understand the conceptual framework, understand, okay, I'll just plug these numbers into what's going on, and it'll make sense. Then I think it would be easier.
And then I think that having a certain box of tricks helps. And your box of tricks doesn't need to be the same as anybody else's. Now, there are certain boxes of tricks that I find to be a lot more helpful than others.
Yeah.
Knowing perfect squares, knowing primes, that is a very good place to start.
Yeah. No, for sure. Knowing the perfect square is good. It's good.
Having an intuitive grasp of order of magnitude.
Yes. Yes. That's really good. That's one I've been strengthening recently that I hadn't. Because it'll be like a huge, some huge number divided by some, like a billion something divided by, a million, and I'm having to, like, change that
and
down.
I don't mean just like times 10 to the 9th and times 10 to the 6th. It's like thinking, well, okay, if we're talking meters, what does that mean? If we're talking, kilograms, what are we talking there? If we're talking, temperature, what does that mean?
Because that helps you physically create it in your mind, the situation, and have an accurate representation.
So you can start by getting this idea in different units. And you could take a thermometer, for example. Thermometer in Celsius or Fahrenheit. Yeah, but they don't have a technique. Oh, yes. Andreas is saying they love memorization in schools. You might think they would at least have a class in memorization techniques if they think that's the way to go. Of course they're not going to have a class in memorization techniques. But memorization is actually one of my very weakest skills.
Me too, yeah.
And the idea of a memory palace, or some sort of a familiar construct where you put new pieces of information, helps. It helps dramatically.
Ever since I was little, I naturally did memory palace stuff. Just that was how my brain, like, I'm sure someone who had a similar thinking style to me was the person who came up with the memory palace technique, because naturally when I'm learning new things, I'll just be in a location in my head. Like, I'll just be in, I don't know, I'll be in a random, like, store. I'll be in, like, my hometown camp, like the campus. It'll be a certain, like, temperature, and not temperature, like, usually it's just lighting. It's very visual. And I'll just be there, like, in a location that I know, and I'll be thinking about the topic. And then when I sometime later, when I go back over the topic, then suddenly I'm in that same location in my head thinking about it, and it all comes back.
Yes.
And it helps so much to do that.
Going on walks while learning can help.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
If the content is in, for example, in audio form, or if you have, one of my favorite things was, oh, they certainly are. I'm still horrible at them compared to other things, but yeah, they are very easy to learn in a short time. Yes, I would totally agree with that, and I would also say that when
Toka's here, awesome.
Yeah, Toka here. We got Andreas, we got Jack. Let's see. So now I lost track of what I was saying. See, this is the problem with when you're thinking and doing a stream of thought thing. You kind of have to break the stream and then go back and then try to hop into the same stream. So please do excuse. So please do excuse me trying to recollect my thoughts. Yeah, I was going to talk about a technique that I learned from a friend in graduate school, and she did this thing where she looked at the textbook for our class, and she took and did her own drawing of all of the figures, complete with color and everything. She drew them all out, one per page, and she just had a, I don't even think it was a binder. I think she just took the rings out of a 3-ring binder, punched it, and then had them like laminated, and she would just carry these around with her own drawings of the figures in the text. And then she would go on walks and look at the drawing and pay attention to where she was, and then she would remember her walk. She would remember going through that particular, walk around campus, walk around town, walk wherever she was walking, walk on the shore, walk in the park. And then when it came time for, remembering chapter 13, she'd think, okay, when I was studying chapter 13, what was the walk that I took? Oh, this is that picture here, and this tells you about this particular way of getting this particular action potential in this particular cell, or whatever it might have happened to have been. And that was an immensely effective trick for her. Now, I didn't use it then, but I have used it since then when trying to memorize important things. And I can vouch for this idea 100%. It fits in the memory palace technique. It fits in the it fits in all of the constructs that have been demonstrated to work. And I have personal albeit anecdotal, but I have personal evidence of it working for me too.
Yeah. And I have one technique that this is something recently that this is specifically in a kind of a type of math, but like last time we talked about like fractions, and we talked about how, like, if you have an intuitive understanding of fractions, you don't actually have to, figure out, like, you can figure out a lot about by looking at specific things, right? Like the sign of the numerator, the sign of the denominator. If this one's getting smaller, it means it's bigger. If the denominator gets smaller, it means the whole number is bigger. If the denominator gets bigger, it's smaller. Things like this. Just having heuristics in your mind that you've like solidified and understood and really gone through.
That you've come up with yourself.
Yes. To when you approach a problem, you essentially you'll grasp so much about it already, and then it's just, oh, that's easy. It's like clockwork. So and I have another one that I've been using, and I have always used, because, for example, you guys might know like mixture word problems, right? Like when there's a mix of two solutions with different percentages, right? And like then you have to do this system of equations to solve it, and it's annoying and it's very mechanical and tedious. And in school, when we first had to come across those, I remember I was like, I'll just kind of like, I really let my subconscious do it, and it wasn't good. Like I got the problems right, but I would actually get problems off because I wouldn't have much work because I didn't really know how to do the work, and I wasn't good at modeling the problem very precisely with math. I didn't go through that process. I didn't want to do that. That was details. This was like, it should make sense. But what I've done is elucidated that sort of subconscious thing I was doing, and I've been trying to like strengthen it so I'm faster at it, and so I don't have to do the system of equations. And so I will show like a specific problem, and this is maybe you get something out of this technique, maybe you don't, but this is just to show an example of how creating your own sort of like mental understanding of these problems and how they work, and your own shortcuts and stuff, like really just be so beneficial for you in saving time and understanding and having basically having a good mathematical intuition, which is what a lot of people say they don't have. Which it's not something. So yes, it could, and to some extent, it's something you have to varying degrees, but it's not some set thing. Oh, I have this intuition. Like, no, you build it by doing more math and approaching it from different angles.
It's just like the cab driver. It's just like the cab drivers in London that wind up having an increased hippocampal size after learning how to navigate the entire city.
Exactly. You get your intuition it gets better by strengthening it and by consciously going out to get better. Mm-hmm. So here's a problem, right? So you need a 15% acid solution for a certain test, but your supplier only ships a 10% solution and a 30% solution. Rather than pay the hefty surcharge to have the supplier make a 15% solution, you mix 10% solution with 30% solution to make your own. You need 10 liters of this solution. How many liters of 10% and 30 solution should you use? So I'm looking at this purple math, and they have this. For mixture problems, it's often very helpful to do a grid. So I'll send the link in chat.
It's like what I do is I look at, okay, what's the total amount of watery stuff that you want, and what's the total amount of stuff you want in the water. That's kind of the way I think about it.
Okay,
Like
interesting.
I remember my first exposure to that kind of a problem, that explicit kind of a problem statement, was after I had learned. It was after I had learned a great deal of calculus. Right? It was kind of funny. But then
That is fun.
but then I was just given this problem, and it wasn't even a it wasn't even a it wasn't in a book. It wasn't a problem. It was literally a problem I had. I wanted 17%, roughly 17% nitromethane in model airplane fuel. And the 17% cost almost as much as the 30%. We had 5% and we had 30%. And the 5% was dirt cheap, relatively speaking. And so I went and I got a thing of 5 and a thing of 13, and I thought, okay, what do I have to do? I want 17%. And it's like, okay, so if I want 1 gallon of this stuff, and I have 1 gallon of this and 1 gallon of that, 1 gallon of 30, 1 gallon of 5, that means I have 2 gallons of, if I mix both of them completely together, I would have 35 divided by 2. And 35 divided by 2 is 17.5, and it was like, okay, well, that's half a percent. That's half divided by 17. That's like almost no difference between that and 17%. That's good enough for me. And so I took an empty gallon bottle of glow fuel, and I just poured. I guesstimate. It's like, okay, that looks like about half, and that looks like about the other half, and okay, now I'll just go and dump the rest of that into there, and now I wound up having 2 bottles of close enough to 17% that it didn't make any difference.
Yeah.
And I was happy with it, and I wound up getting my glow fuel cheaper than everyone else who just went and bought 17% nitromethane fuel. But the reason I did that problem was because I needed it. It wasn't because somebody gave me that problem. It's because I had that problem myself.
Yeah. And so for me, I was given this type of problem, but I didn't really like the way. So if you guys look at this link, they show this. So I'll rehash like the premise of this problem, but I'll show you how they do it and like why it's much more confusing to me. So you need a 15% acid solution, right? And you only the only solutions you can buy are 10% and 30%, and then you'd have to pay a surcharge if you wanted them to make a specific 15% solution for you. You're like, no, I don't want to do that. I'm going to mix these separate ones to create my own 15%, just like Matt did. And you need 10 liters of it. So, for example, I think we can tell, right, that if we add 2 numbers up and divide by 2, like this is what Matt did in his, you get you find the average between them. So if we have a 10 and a 30% solution, then the average between them, it's also halfway between, is just 20%, right? So if we just mixed equal parts of both, we'd get a 20% solution, right? Which is, we want 15%. That's too big, right? So, but what I did specifically was I split okay, so if we look at the difference between a 30% solution and a 10% solution, there's a 20% like different gap, right, between them. And we want 15. So in that 20% gap, where's 15% is right, if you visualize it, like literally, like kind of like have a physical understanding, that 15% is 5% above the lower bound of 10%, right? So it's a fourth. Like it's hard for me to describe this with words without writing the numbers down. So bear with me here, but it's basically a fourth. 5 out of 20 is 1/4, right? So it's 1/4 of the way through that gap, which means it's closer to the 10% solution. 15 is closer to 10% than it is to 30%. That's quite obvious, which means that we need more of the 10%, right? But with that fraction created that we just thought about, the 1/4, is literally that's how much harder. Like that's basically the fraction of how hard each has to pull to itself. So this one has to pull. Okay, it's going to be so hard for me to describe this with words, but I'll just this is not going to be very good for like getting something out of it, but it'll just show you how like shortcutting it helped me personally. But so what I would do is basically, I was like, well, basically since I basically need I was like, okay, well I need 3 times as much of the 10% solution from that fraction. I can tell that I need 3 times as much of the 10% solution as I would of the 30. So that gives me their proportions, and I'm like, okay, so that means 1/4 of the total solution is going to be 30, and 3/4 of it is going to be 10. And then, okay, well, let's see, we need 10 liters. So then I just multiply that by 3/4. Then I'm going to need 7.5 liters of the 10%, and 2.5 liters of the 30%. And then if I look at that, and then that's the correct answer. And that's just, this one pulls, like I think, okay, since it's closer to the 10%, this one pulls harder, etc. So I have these heuristics I'm building on, and it makes me, I can very quickly solve these problems. And if I look at the method that they show us, it's extremely like it's this grid you have to create with like this weird grid, and then you have to solve the systems of equations and make no errors, and there's tons of like, there's so many places I would make mistakes, and I don't like setting up this type of problem. It's not very intuitive in this grid fashion. Like I did not like that. So, but by building my own heuristic and understanding, I was able to solve it.
Exactly, and I drew a picture. It was basically like a. Your video hasn't been too much of a problem. I think I'll. No, actually, I won't. I won't.
I can.
But you have the stream open?
Yeah. I see the picture exactly. See how you can see that fraction, right?
You can see that this is closer to the 10. This is further from the 30. So that means that you're going to need more of the 10, and it's proportionate to this, and you're going to need less of the 30, and it's proportionate to that. And this is 3 times as big. Like you go 1, 2, 3. Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
That is the visualization of your answer.
And that is the fraction, and that's the fraction right there. You can see visually the fraction.
And if you look like here, let's say you divide this into all your different parts. You see 1, 2, 3 to 1 ratio. Means that this is 3/4 of the way toward 10 and 1/4 of the way toward 30. So that means you need 25% of the 30 solution and 75%. So you would need 2.5 liters of the 30 and 7.5 liters of the other one.
Exactly. And that's exactly the visual way that I needed to, along with this description.
That's why I went and got my trusty little blackboard.
So you can see how that's so much quicker than if you look at this grid method. If you click that link, it's
that link was cancer. Just don't bother. Do this.
Yes.
This is easy.
Right, and it shows a physical. It comes with a physical understanding of the problem. Think about it. It's not like, I just did algebra, got the answer, I know the answer. It like this comes with a physical understanding of the problem, and it strengthens your intuition in other areas and thinking in this sort of way. And it's just, and you'll see this type of problem on every standardized test. This comes up on every one, on the ACT, on the GRE, like all of them have these mixture problems. It's because they wanted to, but what they're trying to test is how well you understand system of equations, I'm pretty sure. Because they want to see, okay, let's see if they can, because it is like, if you can do this with system of equations, you're pretty good at systems of equations, because it's kind of tricky. There's a lot of ways to make mistakes. You have to model the problem correctly, etc. But if you just understand how the problem works, you can sidestep all of that, and it's really, you'll save so much time, and it'll be like satisfying as well, because it's just. It's proof of real understanding. So
Andreas even knew where I got my whiteboard or my blackboard from. Yeah, I got it when it was on sale. They were doing this. They were doing a sale on this with the rest of the items. So I didn't spend anywhere near as much as I would have wanted or would have thought I would have.
Awesome.
Now, what I really would like to have is a gigantic piece of slate just to screw up onto the wall. But unfortunately, I don't have a blackboard like that. If I had a blackboard like that, I would actually go and start doing a really intense first principles from the beginning, from the very, very beginning, math course all the way through basically second year of college kind of stuff.
And yeah, but like, for example, and having like the mental heuristics, like for example, that mental model that I think of, I kind of think of it as like a tug of war between the two, right? Like each one wants to be itself, but the other percentage wants to be itself. So when they go together, they're going to like meet in the middle, right? If they're in equal parts, they're just going to pull in the middle, and you'll get the value right in the middle. But this one's pulling harder, which means stronger, which means more of it, so etc. And
you think about what equilibrium position do you want, and therefore which one is going to be pulling harder in what proportion, and so on.
Exactly. And then you build the fraction from the difference, and then figure and it's very quick. Like that's very quick. I can do that problem in my head completely, and I could not do that system. Like maybe, like if you gave me 30 minutes to look at that system of equation, I could slowly work it out, like in my head, and like try not to forget each number, and then. Okay, like, and it would be really hard, and I would want to fall asleep afterwards, and
yeah, but doing it with round numbers like 10 and 30, if you can quickly do the problem as opposed to needing to solve the system of equations in that particular way, you save yourself so much time.
And even if you don't have round numbers, you can just I know.
Well, if it's A, B, C, D, and you know that this is the only one that's even remotely close to the estimation that I got, which is another reason ABCD tests suck. But
because you don't actually have to do it.
You don't actually have to do anything in order to
no, exactly.
ABCD tests.
For sure. No, but and yeah, so that, or you can just be like, oh, okay, these are not round numbers. You can still like build the fraction. It'll just be like weird, and then you'll have to simplify it. Right? It's like, oh, it's like 15 eighths or something. That's bad. Or 8/15ths, let's say. Like, oh, okay. Like the method can be applied quite. Like you can think of the method in a certain way that you would just plug in the numbers as well. Like, okay, so this one's do this, etc. It doesn't have to be like perfect round numbers. It's really good. And yeah, so just having a heuristic like that will. I try to build a heuristic for every type of problem that I try to have link it to some sort of physical understanding of what's going on. Link it to, make an analogy. For example, the tug of war. I think of it as a tug of war between the two. And if we're pulling with equal strength, we land in the middle. It makes sense. So, like thinking of it in multiple ways just strengthens your intuition so much, and it'll build this number sense and what's going on, and it'll impress people. They'll be like, "How did you do that so quick?" Because they're doing it with systems of equations, and you're like, "Oh, I don't know, it just happens." Say something like that, and they're like, "What are you talking?" Like, and you say that because you don't actually want to go describe it to etc. Because some people don't want to learn and whatever, but it's like it's a good thing. Like it's just such a good thing, and it makes it fun. It actually it feels very personal. Like the problem, it doesn't feel like I'm just learning some technique that some freaking idiot up there told me to do, and they're making me do it, and I have to sit in this chair for hours a day, and I have to do this. No, it's like, no, I'm gonna approach it my own way. Like I have you see that little bit of freedom, and it makes it much more enjoyable in every way. Like there's so many pros to this sort of thing, and I think it's. Like this sort of thing is what fundamentally, scientists and like it's like part of the big allure of just like STEM and just intellectual things, I suppose. Not just STEM, is making things your own, and coming to that deeper understanding, and being, figure out a quicker way. Like it's always rewarding, and it's ubiquitous, right? So like it's part of the big, like Feynman did this a lot. Feynman is famous for doing this with. He's like, the way he thought of integrals. I don't know the specifics. I just know this happened. I don't know, so don't ask me in any of the details. But he could solve integrals that no one else could because he had his own way that he thought of them and he understood. And he had his own way of modeling things in his head that made sense to him. He did exactly this. And interestingly enough, Feynman, I think, was also an ENTP, but
there's nothing else that he could have been.
Yes.
That's yeah. Feynman wasn't. It was. Yeah.
And yeah, so it's as you can see, if Feynman's doing it, it's probably not too bad, you know.
Like getting marked wrong for using the wrong method, though. Toke, I was bringing up this point that in school, deviating from the taught standard formulaic methods doesn't always go well with teachers and exams. It's like getting marked wrong for using the wrong method. Okay.
I hate that. Yeah, it happened to me all the time. This is an uncomfortable side effect of this sort of thing.
It's an uncomfortable side effect for dealing with idiots. That's all it is. And literally, what you have to do is learn what you have to learn first. That is your priority number one, is actual learning. Then you need to go and learn what is the code words that idiots need in order for them to go and give you points and think that you know what you're talking about. That's part number two. Those are the two parts that you need in order to actually be able to get good grades. Now, if you actually have a good teacher, you don't need to worry about that. But
yeah, oh yeah, and I say, if you have a heuristic, this is what I'm an ENTP. This is what I would do if a teacher was like, "Don't do that method." I would literally challenge them. I'd be like, "Okay, let's both solve a problem. Let's see who can do it faster and more accurately. Let's both do." Teacher, you're the teacher. You know this better than anyone else.
Yeah,
I'll do your
challenge.
method. Yeah, you do your method. I'll do mine. Let's see who gets it.
Well, how would you feel about a quick? Because I would like to, like, Jack knows that he can do math. He knows that he'd be able to do that if he puts the time in. What do you say we have a little teeny talk about the unit circle?
Sure, go ahead.
All right, I drew a circle. At least I drew a really horrible representation of a circle that isn't exactly round. But but the idea of a unit circle, like this lesson here is already going to go, and we're going to jump straight into trigonometry, however you say that thing that has to do with triangles. That really isn't about triangles at all, but that one. See, this is how you know that we're professional teachers.
Yeah, because we don't even know how to pronounce what we're teaching. Yes.
That looks like my head.
But yeah, so let's get into this.
There we go.
Can you? Okay, cool.
So, anyhow, here's Matt's head, and the unit circle means that Matt's head has a radius of 1. Matt's head, from nose to cheek, or from nose to the top of the head, or anywhere, has a radius of 1. And that's the reason they call it a unit circle. Like, if you have 1 meter, that would be one of that unit. If it was a 1 centimeter circle or a 1 foot circle, the idea is that this is a unit circle, so you can focus on the ratio of things and distances that you travel, as opposed to saying, well, what happens if the circle has a radius of 2? Or if it has a radius of 5 or whatever. So we start with saying that the circle has a radius of 1, so we can look at the different, how far you go in certain axes. So if you wind up say having the y-axis pointed straight up and the x-axis pointed straight to the right, we all know that this is 90 degrees from the x to the y. But the way that you, at least in most of trig, measure angles is not in degrees. I mean, you can 90, 180, 270, 360, and so on, but you actually measure them as arc lengths of the unit circle. So if you remember, the circumference of a circle is 2 pi r. 2 pi r. Well, if the radius is 1, then that means that the distance around this circle is 2 pi. So you don't need to think about the radius when you're dealing with the unit circle, because the distance around it is 2 pi. Now, the way you go and demonstrate an angle in the unit circle is by saying how far you have to go around the unit circle in order to get to that angle. So this angle might be, I don't know, it would be pi over 6 or something. So this would be, well, all the way around the circle would be 2 pi. So this would be half pi, 1 pi, 3/2 pi, and 2 pi. So that's half pi. Then a 45-degree angle would be 1/4 pi. And so on. So basically, you stop thinking in terms of these angles, and you start thinking in terms of how far around the circle are we going. And then, okay, well, if we want to know sine, cosine, and tangent, the sine of the angle is just this length of this side of this triangle for any given arc length. And the cosine is this length of this side for any given triangle. And then, of course, if it's going this way, it's a negative x value, and if it's going that way, it's a negative y value. But ultimately, all you ever need to do is understand that you care about the lengths of these two sides. And then the tangent is y divided by x. And then you can go and derive all the other relationships. So literally all you need to understand the unit circle and everything is basically understanding that it's 2 pi radians to go around. This is the sine. That is the cosine. These two divided by each other is the tangent. And then you can go and say, well, okay, the sine will be positive here as long as the angle is in between 0 and pi, because the y is always going to be going up. And we will know the cosine will be positive here because the x is going this way, negative here, positive or negative here, and positive there. So basically you can just look and see on which side of the y-axis you are. If you're over here, the cosine will be positive, and if you're over here, the cosine will be negative. And then for tangent, you need to know that, okay, here and here the tangent will be positive, and there the tangent will be negative. Basically, you need to look at the side. Okay, if x and y are both positive, then the tangent will be positive, and x and y are both negative, then you have a negative divided by a negative, which is also a positive. So then the only times when you have x and y having opposite signs are the only times that tangent is going to be negative. Now that was just a very quick run through But that is at least 80% of what you need to know, if not more,
Yeah, it's most, yeah, I think
about
so.
basic trigonometry with this idea of the unit circle. And you can do it with just a picture of my head. And that's all you need. And if I was unclear about anything, you can ask in the comments or shoot me a Quora message or whatever, and I'll attempt to draw a better diagram, or maybe if we need to explain tangent again, I can, and have it written down so that you can go and refer back to it again. But this
Right.
is basically this is really all there is. And get this right, what I just said here in the past few minutes or whatever is what they'd spend probably about 2 months teaching you this in school.
Oh yeah, so long.
They would spend 2 months teaching you this in school. And you don't need to spend 2 months learning this. If you need to spend 2 months learning something, focus on something that's actually going to give you problems. But don't struggle with this for 2 months.
No.
Like if you have the background, this should take you 20 minutes to understand.
Yeah, and that's that. I remember this is one of the things in school where I was like, "What's going on?" Because when we learned trig, I was like, "Oh, okay, that's how that is. Okay, that makes sense." And then I was like, the first homework was just easy. It's just like, just fractions, and it's just the x, y, etc. What's this value? How many radians is this, etc., etc. What angle? All of that. I was like, okay, this makes sense. Pretty fun. All you need to know is that the sine is the y and the cosine is the x, and then that's it. It's just a
And
triangle.
that's it. And you can find in old textbooks they have tables of sines and cosines in the back. Now
And
we have calculators that will just tell you sines and cosines.
And what I found though is that it was one of those things. I was like, "What's going on?" My classmates are like just trying to memorize all these like values, like what's this angle? What's that? Like they're trying to memorize everything and like confused by what the hell is happening.
Just
They're
draw
like,
the unit circle, and then see, okay, if this is 0, we'll just say pi divided by 2, pi, 2 pi divided by, 3 pi divided by 2, 2 pi. Basically, if you label your unit circle, and you look at positive and negative x and y values, and someone asks you a question, in which quadrant? Oh, okay, that's the other piece of information that you need. This is quadrant 1, Roman numeral 1. This is quadrant Roman numeral 2. This is quadrant Roman numeral 3. And this is quadrant Roman 4. That's that's about it. And then you can say, okay, in quadrant 1, sine, cosine, and tangent are positive. In quadrant 2, sine is positive, cosine and tangent are negative. In quadrant 3, sine and cosine are negative and tangent is positive. And in quadrant 4, sine is negative, cosine is positive, and tangent is negative. That's literally all you would need to be able to do that. And you're literally only doing it by looking, are numbers up or down of 0, or left or right of 0.
Yeah.
Public school is purposely obfuscating math. Maybe. Or maybe everyone that actually knows math doesn't go and become a public school teacher. Because they can, make more money doing something real.
Yeah, very true.
Although I think that teaching should be a real thing. Teaching should be actually done right. But the problem is, you're never going to wind up getting teachers given the money that they need. If you look at, for instance, all of the money wasted on administration, all of the inefficiencies, if you're paying $11,000 per student on average in the United States, and don't have them coming out of a trig class being able to explain this in under 20 minutes to one of their peers, there is something seriously wrong. There is something seriously wrong, because there should not be a problem understanding this.
No.
And if you cannot understand this, if you physically cannot understand this, then you should not be in a trig class. And you should be like more concerned about, okay, can I balance a checkbook? Can I tie my shoes? Can I actually take care of myself?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't say this in any kind of a nasty way. I'm just saying that people need to be given the education that they can take. But I would contend that many people can take way more education than what they're actually given because of how poorly, of how abysmally things are taught. And if people go into school assuming that their teachers actually know something, then they will go and doubt themselves when they start thinking, well, this doesn't actually make any sense. I must be stupid, rather than this doesn't make any sense. My teacher must be a moron.
Yeah.
Like, there's a big difference.
It's supposed to make sense. It's a logical system. It works together. It's supposed to, be clear and be logical, and it's supposed to make sense. It's not like math being confusing is antithetical to its logical structure, right?
Like math is supposed to be one of the most predictable, easy, and logical things that you learn in school.
Yeah.
And it is if you think about it as it's supposed to be thought about.
Yes.
But if you think about it as, oh, this is just something hard that we have to memorize our way through, rather than
it's hard to memorize your way through. Yeah.
It's like, yeah. Then you have to remember, okay, quadrant 1. 0 to pi over 2. All right. I'm just going to keep a tally of what you would need to know in order to explain, if you memorize your way through this, how many pieces of information you need to know. Okay, so quadrant 1, sine is positive, cosine positive, tangent positive. Angle starts at 0, angle ends at pi over 2. I'm sorry. Sorry again. Sorry, sine, cosine, tangent, positive. Angle starts at 0, angle ends at pi over 2. Quadrant 1. 6, 12, 18. So there you have 24 bits of information plus unit circle. Radius is 1. That's 25 bits of information. 2 pi r is 26. Alright, so you need to memorize at least 26 separate facts if you're going to memorize your way through what I told you. And you're going to need to be able to at least draw the unit circle exactly the way your teacher told you to. And you're going to need to be able to answer questions exactly as your teacher told you to.
Yeah.
So if you're going you're going to have to go through understanding. Okay, so 26 bits of information. Don't get a single one of them wrong, or you will get the entire problem wrong. Or maybe you'll be given partial credit in terms of how many of the 26 you actually do know, assuming the problem actually tests all 26, right? But that, as opposed to just being like, okay, one, two, three, four. Plus, minus, plus, minus. Okay. And if you have the picture, you don't even really need to think, okay, that's plus or that's minus, because you know that's plus and minus. It's like that. You don't hopefully need to memorize where plus and minus are on a graph. I really hope we wouldn't be at that particular point when you're going into a trig class.
Yeah, no, ideally not.
but even if you were,
you could actually just That's things you might have to learn what this is. This is this. This is that. But then you could do it. I feel like it might be slower and less intuitive. But...
All right. So yeah, Jack says it's not that math is intellectually taxing. Oh, hello, Andrew. Good to see you. One pictorial memorization should suffice. Yes, it should. It should. And you wouldn't even need to memorize necessarily if you can go and put other pieces of information that you've learned in other contexts together. And if you would have built this math based on this contextual understanding of the whole situation, bit by bit over the course of 12 years, there is no way that you should, after doing things right for, say, 10 years, you would have trouble with this. Now, after doing things wrong for 10 years, you could have serious issues. But at that point, it's like, what have people been doing? What have people been trying to fill your head with? Amen. If you don't enjoy rote memorization of the material, you don't like the subject. Well, I don't know. I mean, I hate rote memorization of chemical things, but I like chemistry. But I don't like I like being able to be creative. I like I like being able to go and get a big picture, look at something, and understand how it works. I don't. I mean, like I can write. I at one point had the periodic table memorized. Now I only have some parts of it memorized, the parts that I used the most. But I memorized them more on account of the fact that I saw this stuff so often that I knew, okay, carbon is 12, has an atomic number or atomic weight of 12, atomic number of 6, kind of a thing. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, atomic number of 6, atomic weight of 12.011, or whatever it might be. You have 12 isotopes of 12, 13, and 14. But the only reason I know any of this stuff is because I've had to go and learn it based on, things like carbon-14 dating, or having to have busted my butt through a year of organic chemistry or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, like...
But being able to go and just, draw a circle. People won't think, oh, that's hard math. People will think it's easy. And if people think something is hard, then that gives them job security, right? If you can go and convince a whole bunch of people, this is so hard you don't even want to try, or this is so hard, leave it to the experts, then that artificially inflates your perceived value. But then if you realize, oh, this is something that anybody can do, then it's like, oops, I guess I'm out of a job. It's pretty bad. Pretty bad.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and that's the thing with math, that I can source back to my first ever introduction to school, kindergarten, being kind of like, I understood how people kind of viewed math as a little bit difficult, but then like when I saw the simplicity of it, I would be very excited. So like I've said this story before, but guys, what's 1 plus 1? Everyone knows that 2. The guys, what's 100 plus 100? I don't know. They say, I don't know. Like, guys,
yeah, it's like it's
amazing.
It's 200. It's like I got
200.
I got one box of 100 apples, another box of 100 apples. Together, I have two 100s or 200 apples.
Yeah, I was like, this is just. Yeah, I was like, it's wonderful.
But because nobody told them to think, okay, think of units in a particular way.
Yeah, right.
Then you wind up memorizing the same thing in slightly different contexts over and over again, as opposed to getting a conceptual understanding of what's going on. And that's not fair to anybody. That's especially not fair to the kids.
No. And yeah, exactly. It really is. And the kids were like, oh, they're like, they saw a big number 100, and they're like, well, when you're in kindergarten, 100 is pretty big.
Yeah, and then you immediately check out, and that's not fun.
And it's like, no, like we can make these kind of big scary things, like we can disarm them completely and understand their essence. And it's, in the horror movie, is the monster scary when you understand everything about it and what it's going to do, and like no, it's not, right? Like part of it, like literally fear is
Yeah,
inspired by
it's unpredictability.
exactly, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah,
And that borders all back to the order and chaos thing that we wind up doing our best work as human beings, where we've gone and taken our ordered structures and pushed them as far as we can up against chaos, and we're right there at the edge of having enough of what we know to be safe, but enough
yeah,
new information that we're still in the process of putting it all together and trying to figure out how to deal with it. But whenever we need a breather, we can always take a step back into order, maybe take a nap, eat something, regroup, and try again. And that can go for intellectual things, it can go for physical things, it can go for all sorts of things.
yeah.
It's how we are built to work.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And yeah, school just sort of obfuscates things, and
Yeah.
um, it's like, why,
I would hope not
Why?
intentionally, but I would say that at least in many situations, it's very difficult for me to believe that it's not.
Yeah, right. Um, Especially like the thing is, like it's so annoying, right? Like the punishing students for if you get the right answer and you do it in a different way than they thought
Yeah,
you were going to do it.
if you're not goose stepping, if you are not marching in perfect alignment with everybody else, goose stepping, left, right, left, right, left, it doesn't matter if you get the right answers because you didn't do exactly what they told you to do. If it winds up being a
Yeah,
question of compliance, if it's about whether or not you comply or whether or not you are the same as everybody else, then I would say that then people are perpetuating something horrible.
yeah, oh yeah.
But if it's a, a lot of it boils down to what it is people are trying to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say a lot of people, a lot of people believe in the system. A lot of people think it's horrible. Um,
Yep.
and, and you once again have to go back to basic principles to even begin to understand why it exists as it does. And I would say that it's a combination of many things. Like the Bismarckian system in Germany, or Fichte's address to the German nation. Things like that kind of explain why education got to be where it is, but ultimately you got a bunch of human nature that kind of, you get a snowball rolling, and then human nature goes and keeps compounding things until you wind up with this gigantic, U.S. Department of Education that's just a bloated federal money sink that doesn't actually educate anybody, but rather is responsible in the United States for lower levels of literacy than has ever been observed in any of U.S. history amongst every single group.
Yeah.
There was one point in history where 99.6% literacy was considered normal, and woe to the 4 out of 1,000 that couldn't read. And literacy meant being able to, for instance, understand Shakespeare at a graduate school level today.
Yeah.
And people were achieving that as 11 to 13-year-olds. It was like, what happened? It's like, what happened? It's like 4 out of 1,000 people can't do that, but they can still do basic reading and writing and arithmetic and things like that. Well, that's pretty amazing. That is amazing. You didn't have the U.S. Department of Education. You didn't have federal mandates of anything. There were standards here and there and all the rest of it, but it was very decentralized, and it was based upon what people needed. Like people were free in many aspects to get the kinds of teachers they wanted and learn what they wanted, and it worked.
Yeah.
Jack says, creativity violently smashed. The student's will begins to deteriorate. But teacher, did I not solve the problem?
Yeah, that's a very
Oh, that's so horrible, but so
very accurate.
true. So true. And
Oh yeah.
and it's interesting that it's the thing I don't get is that both you and I are the kinds of people that completely destroyed it in school, like standardized tests and stuff. That was stuff was easy for us,
Yeah.
and we like easier for us than we ever deserved. And still, even though we happen to understand what was going on, we're saying the system is horrible.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah, completely. No, I'm not. I was never someone who did particularly poorly in school. I would underperform. Of course, I'm supposed to be getting all A's because I'm a smart kid. All right, like, but I would do well on the test. Testing. If you looked at just my tests, I would have very very high scores. Especially in the subjects where more conceptual loading and less rote. And yet I still had lots of friction with my interaction with the system, with the school system, because they're screwing a lot of things up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so even I think it's kind of proof, right, that there's if the people who are doing really well within your system, in certain ways, of course, there's other problems, but are like, I hate this. That's a sign that something's wrong, right? It just is like, because when someone, it's a scientific experiment, right? An independent variable, you're isolating a variable there, right? So when someone who does horribly in school is like, school's so screwed up, doesn't teach us anything, like they might just be upset that school's not working for them and they're underperforming and they feel bad, etc.
Yeah.
But when the people who are doing well are saying, "Hey, this is just shit," like that's a bad sign, right?
Yeah.
Like they have everything to benefit from a system that they can take advantage of, but that's it's not worth it in the overall for everyone else's overall understanding of the content and education as a whole.
And I would say an awful lot of my understanding of the subject material came from avoiding school. I did well on standardized tests. I mean, I had to take some of them, right? I couldn't avoid a lot of them.
Yeah.
But going to university when I was 11 years old, being able to avoid the majority of high school, being able to avoid the majority of middle school and elementary school, and being able to like literally go to the library. Like I had stuff I needed to learn in order to keep up with the standards, right? I had to learn it. But the way I learned it was by reading and by applying what I had read and thinking about it and asking questions. And one little assignment would often lead to reading way more on certain things that caught my interest. I was really, really interested at one point in World War II history, and so I learned a lot more about World War II than I ever had to know in order to pass a class. Or I wound up learning a lot more about math than I ever needed to in order to pass high school. But it was because I wanted to design airplanes. But there was the very basic level of competence, but I didn't have homework as such. I never had homework, but I did have to go and as a homeschooled student, I would basically finish a week's worth of work by noon on Monday, and the way they would know that I knew this stuff is I would explain it to my dad.
Let's see.
Like,
did I cut out?
Yeah, you did.
Okay.
I would explain it to my dad. And back when I had spelling tests and things like that, I didn't have spelling tests. Sometimes I had to spell words, but often my dad would just take the list of words and ask me, okay, spell this one backwards, or spell that one forwards, or spell this one skipping every other letter. Or, like,
Right.
I never had a normal spelling test in my life.
Right.
Ah,
Yeah,
cool.
that's good. That's cool. That makes it much more interesting.
It was fun. Ah, you
Yeah.
like World War II as well, Jack. Wonderful. Wonderful. I came up with some interesting theories about favorite.
My favorite.
My
That is
favorite
fun.
war. My favorite war. I wasn't
I
even
like that
alive
one.
for it. Oh boy, that's that was. I'm sorry. That's that's actually pretty funny, but but thinking about it makes you, you can't go and really study war without contemplating things like good and evil. Like, I suppose you can think about logistics or about philosophy or whatever, but eventually when you go and you ponder, our existence, you're forced to deal with difficult questions.
Yeah.
And you're forced to think about things, and if you care enough about something, you're gonna pursue things down to the very root of it all, and you might not necessarily like what you find, but at
Hmm.
least hopefully you've been going through the process of seeking truth.
Yeah. You've learned something.
Yeah, trivialities weren't blown out of proportion by adults to you at such an age. Or my favorite, my absolute favorite, 100% my favorite. Don't ask that question until you get older. We'll focus on that in another 5 years.
It's like, no, I want to know now.
It's like, if you have a child who's sitting there waiting, you obviously, and this is something that you don't, look, if someone wants to know why, um, why did the Holocaust happen? How could people do that? That's a fair question to ask.
Hmm. Yeah.
And you're not going to have an easy answer to that question. There is not an easy answer. But being unwilling to explore that, being completely unwilling to talk about it at a developmentally appropriate level to the kids, that's not fair to
Yeah.
anybody. That's
No,
not fair to anybody.
and it teaches a kid to not ask like certain types.
Significant
Just what?
questions.
Right. And they're like, oh, I guess that's too harsh for us to cover. It's like, no, no such thing. Like,
It's like, if
and
you
that's
don't
how
cover
these
that
sacred
stuff,
cows are created, right?
yeah, and if you don't cover that stuff, if you don't get a chance to ask all the hard questions, and sometimes not even get the answers, often not get the answers.
Yeah.
If you're forced to function in these little boxes, this is this little box of 1944, this is a box of 1942, this box of 1930, okay, 1930 German history, 1935, 1938 in German, what was happening. Like, each of those boxes in and of itself doesn't tell you too much without the context. That's why you need to be, shooting out the spider webs here and there and creating a web of information. And as you live longer and add more to it, you can come up with a more rich and full understanding. But you gotta start somewhere, and you gotta start asking questions. Because when you're the one asking questions and you're the one searching, you're going to be caring way more about what the knowledge is that you're putting in your head than if you
Mhm.
don't have any skin in the game and you don't care about what it is that you're learning.
Yeah.
Well, if you don't, yeah, and Jack said, oh, we shouldn't ask questions regarding that. It's related to the Holocaust. How awful. Yeah.
Yeah. My
Unless,
God.
do you want to have another one? Go ahead. Don't
Yeah.
learn about it.
Right. Exactly. Literally.
It's like, no. Oh, do you want to have another 60 million people killed like under Mao Zedong in China? Go ahead. Don't learn about socialism.
Yeah. The Great
Oh,
Leap Forward.
did you think that that Stalin and Lenin were great? Oh, great. Then get a revisionist understanding of communism in Russia. Oh, what about Guevara or Chavez or people like that? Oh, well, don't worry about them.
Right.
No, no. I mean, history is full of conflict, of good, of evil, of people that needed to be stronger and smarter and more clever and needed to figure things out in order to stand up for what they believed in. And if you can't articulate those things, you are doomed to repeat the things that you don't want to repeat if the situations ever replicate themselves. Whereas
Yeah.
at least you'll have some idea of what, like, if we all have the world on a string, and some of us can pull harder than others, but if we all have the world on a string, or at least whatever part of the world we happen to be in, we can have a little bit of impact in the right direction.
Yep.
If we have the right context, know how to pull, and know in which way to pull.
Indeed. Indeed.
And that's
Yeah.
part of why I think that, especially now given the information age and how easy it is to get information, that the
Yeah.
educational system needs to be restructured in order to account for that.
And exactly what. Again, I don't know the names of the. I don't have. So I'm just gonna say exactly what Legolas says. And is that Jack or is that
Legolas is Jack.
Okay. Okay.
Sipover is Andreas. I'm assuming
Okay.
Andrew is
Cool.
Andrew.
Yep. That seems reasonable. But yeah.
In fact,
What
Andrew,
Jack
I
says.
don't recall. Have you been watching the streams previously? I haven't seen you around, but it's great to have you here. Thank you for participating.
I feel it seems familiar. I feel as though I have seen it, but I could be wrong. Could be wrong.
I know I've seen his stuff on Quora. I've read his stuff on Quora. It's all pretty good.
Okay, not live.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have seen him on Quora as well.
Yeah, his stuff is his stuff on Quora is really good. But I haven't been able to interact with him live before. It's awesome to have him here. It's yeah. These hangouts, these times to be able to chill and kind of read the chat, interact with other people, interact with you. It's
This is good. I know it's really.
I enjoy it, and it's so nice to know that from all corners of the world we can come together and talk about important things.
Well, and one thing that discussing about it in life like this, because we're not exactly coming. There's nothing very contentious happening, right? Like we're not having huge disagreements, and someone from the outside might be like, well, if you're not disagreeing and moving towards a common goal, blah blah, are disagreeing and improving, etc. Well, of course we are improving. Someone might say, well, how good can a conversation be if there's not many disagreements? But we are finding significance. Like, for example, if you have an opinion on something, if you're the only person that you know with that opinion and that, you might start doubting yourself. Like, if you're the only person who is a certain way and you're like, and you see other kids and no one else is like that, and you're like, man, am I just weird? Am I wrong? Like, that inspires kind of like doubt, right? But in discussing these fleshing out, articulating, developing these ideas, it sharpens us and gives you more conviction and gives you more like strength. I say like strength of mind. Like in certain situations, I'm like I'm not doubting myself. Like I don't doubt these convictions that I have, and if I'm disagreeing with someone who who doesn't agree with what I'm saying, I'm less likely to just give up. Like I'm gonna fight by what I believe in and like and you know what I support and what I know to be correct, or at least
Yeah.
what I feel very strongly to be correct.
And it doesn't mean that we need to be completely, immovable. Like if we're faced with somebody
No.
that actually goes and puts the facts down and says, here, you're wrong here, and this is why it is.
Exactly.
And especially if we can do this respectfully, telling other people that and receiving that kind of feedback.
I would
venture to say that between just the two of us here on screen, we probably have many more very significant disagreements about aspects of life than would pretty much any two random people that you go and pick from that grew up in a similar culture.
Yeah.
However, and this is a big however, we know, I think, in many aspects anyhow, we make an effort to construct the other person's point of view, see where that person comes from, see what sorts of elements have gone into and what sorts of contingencies and context and try to understand the structure of it, and then it's like, well, okay,
yes,
if you start with these assumptions and you start with this worldview, well, then you're obviously going to have this view. And if I start with these assumptions and this structure and this worldview, then I'm all obviously going to have this idea.
Precisely. Exactly.
And then we can pick, areas of contention and talk about them. But if when we have areas of contention, it's not like we're going to go blow up. We're going to have a very cordial, wonderful, constructive, upbuilding conversation, even when we disagree. And when we do agree, we're going to be able to come up with, okay, this is what we can go and tell other people. This is how we can push these ideas forward.
Right. Analogies we can use, etc.
Yeah. But being able to go and bounce ideas off of each other and not lose our cool. Being able to bounce ideas and keep a level head and have open and honest communication. That sort of a thing is incredibly important, and being able to do it in a public forum where we have a repository of this. Like, you can go and literally say to your kids 20 years down the road, Daddy's opinions have changed in this time. However, this is what I thought back then.
Exactly.
This is where I was. Now things have changed. Some things have remained the same. Some things I'm completely of a different opinion. But at least you can now see in the very moment this is what I was believing. And if I all of a sudden were to keel over and die, well, at least I'll have something to leave for my posterity. That they could look through my records and through my journals and things like that.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking they would probably get a lot more just by looking at this, and having this technology available at your fingertips is a huge privilege.
It is. It is assuredly the case. Yeah. It really is. And like like as Jack says, I must say like this. It's hard to be dubious when when there's so many uncertainties. Hard not to be. Am I morally just, etc., etc. So yeah, like having these ideas strengthened and logically strengthened, and not just that feels right. It's like what I was gonna say is like we're developing like our FI almost. That's what it feels like. Like I'm developing my FI, like my internal sense of what's right and wrong, and like my feeling towards it, like something that I think like in logical people like me and Matt, we might
lots of people watching the stream.
Yeah. Oh yes. Or everyone watching this stream.
Yeah, pretty much everybody. I mean, I would say that some people might be more feelings oriented, and some might be more absolutely no feelings. Right.
Right. Exactly.
But yeah.
But we sometimes like that can inspire doubt because you're trying to like logically, you might try to logically disassemble everything and kind of run into like problems that you can't really conceptualize in a nice framework. and you actually need some sort of a feeling and emotion and some sort of morals and some FI, basically.
Yeah,
FI,
basically,
right?
what is your internal moral compass and system of values? What keeps you aligned? What keeps you going in the direction that you're going, and keeps you from straying and doing something else here or there?
Exactly. He's an INTJ, so logic is his sustenance. Yep. Oh yeah. So yeah.
And it's interesting because as an INTJ, you're actually an intuitive, predominantly intuitive, or predominantly what's what I'm looking for? Predominantly perceptive, not judging, even though it is J. Your extroverted sense is TE, it's judging. And you're going to come across as being way more judging than you actually are.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so it strengthens that moral compass and gives you that direction. So when things get weird and harsh, that you like, okay, like I've talked about this, I've thought about this a lot. Like this is not some stance I hold for no reason, just because it, like there's many stances that I just logically held that I wouldn't if I was gonna try to convince someone else. It'd be hard because we might think in different ways, but in fleshing it out like this, I have much more material to draw upon in defending my point of view and how etc. And that makes you more convincing. Having more conviction and having more just, it's in this. For example, an analogy would be, let's say you have an experiment and you have one trial which behaved how you expected it did, right? Like a trial that versus 100 trials that also behaved how you expected. So in both circumstances you got to the same answer, but you're much more convinced with the 100 trials, right, than you are with just one trial and maybe one logical look at things. Like, oh, that seems like that it worked correctly. By having like much more information, and it just gives you that conviction that's very important, extremely important.
Yeah. And then when you wind up having people that are fundamentally very different, like let's say, I don't know, if my communist friend and I are in the same room, and I know that might in and of itself come across as a huge surprise. Matt has a communist friend. Yeah, I do. And it's actually very interesting because he has he's aiming for stuff so very similar to what I'm aiming for, in terms of he's incredibly empathetic. One of the most caring people you will meet. Like, he's not the kind of a person who actually wants to go and do this at the point of a gun. He is actually not wanting to, for instance, take away our rights. In fact, he's a very firm believer in human rights. He just thinks that people will function better, specifically without property rights. He thinks that it's possible to do that with a particular moral structure and so on. Right? And so we get into conversations about property rights from time to time, and we bounce ideas off, and but ultimately that doesn't preclude us from being able to do other things.
Right.
And from getting along well in other aspects of life. And it's not like we have to all of a sudden become mortal enemies.
No.
Because ultimately, even though he doesn't believe that property rights should be a thing, he's not the kind of a person who's going to be taking away my property from me.
No.
And he wouldn't want other people to take away his property from him as long as he lives in a society that has any kind of capitalistic tendencies whatsoever. Now, granted, he is willing, for instance, to give up some things that belong to him in order to make life better for other people. But I've asked him, and he said, yeah, I think I would be better than the government at determining what that might be. And what to do with the resources that I produce. but I think the idea of living in small communes is what he would like. He wouldn't. I don't know what he would think about it on a larger scale. But he keeps on reverting to the small commune ideal, which is interesting because ultimately, I would say in many aspects, if we talk about from each according to his ability to each according to his need, a family is communistic. But nevertheless, you wind up functioning under a capitalistic framework with property rights, and this idea that ultimately I should be able to decide what to do with what's mine.
Yeah.
Now, if that means, having a family, and my wife and I deciding to divide labor the way that we divide them, and then ultimately raising children who from the very beginning are going to be huge resource sinks. Like, you go and you spend a lot of time and energy and effort and money on your kids, but in the end you realize, okay, they're going to be growing up and they're going to be hopefully good members of their family or society, and whatever social circles they happen to be in. Then ultimately it is an investment.
It's setting up.
You're setting up your kids to succeed.
Yeah, it's from each according to his own, to each from each according to their ability, to each in accordance with what they need, right? But it's so they can. It's setting it up so
with
that
a particular end goal in mind.
So that person who does have the need can eventually later on the life be the person who has the ability to give to other people.
Exactly.
It's not just so they can be average, right? It's not. It's a little bit different.
You have an incentive as a family member to not be constantly giving your stuff to a leech, and so you teach the children to grow up and to produce and to contribute, and you teach them little bit by little bit with whatever you start out with. Well, whatever it is. I mean, you might start out with, I don't know, a kiddo being interested in folding the laundry. Okay, we start with that. Okay, now you can help with the dishes. And sure, at the beginning it winds up being more just a question of mopping up a whole bunch of water off the floor after the kids are done, and they generate more work than what it is that they're producing, but the attitude's right and they're learning. And you put all this extra work in at the beginning, and then you start reaping the rewards, like when you see them growing up and becoming responsible and making good decisions. It's ultimately getting to that point where all of the decisions that they make that are good and consequential add up to something. Meanwhile, all the screw-ups were little and in a controlled environment while they were growing up and learning. You wind up having the net contribution of the human beings to generally be positive. And then society can move forward, your family can move forward, and ultimately you wind up having more resources, and if you are a caring person, for example, that you can use for loving and caring for others. At least that's kind of my outlook.
Well, and then eventually, in your old age, they might be helping you then take care of you at times, right? Like your kids.
I fully expect to be, and eventually they grow up to be Stalin. I certainly hope not. Oh boy, that'd be terrible.
If they grow up to
read Andreas's comment.
Oh.
And eventually they grow up to be Stalin.
Oh,
no! Alright, there we go.
Ooh, stream went offline.
Yeah. Unfortunately, these principles aren't ubiquitous, and that's the thing is, I ultimately don't think they need to be, because I think that in terms of surrounding ourselves with the right kinds of people, deciding who we want to be with, and surrounding ourselves with them, we can have for ourselves at least the kind of lives we want to have, as long as people generally stay out of it. If stay out of our lives if you don't actually want to be a part of our lives, and so on, and we'll stay out of your lives if you don't want us involved with you, and we can work with each other and be with each other insofar as we both agree to do so. It's about living in community, and ultimately, Dunbar's number of about 148 people, that's about as many people as you really can intimately care about to any appreciable level. After that, it becomes way more abstract, which means it becomes way less caring.
Right.
So I would say that, find your tribe, so to speak. Find the group of people that you care about and find your role. And I don't mean that it needs to somehow be static or like, know your place. It's not like that. It's it's more just that, wherever you are, be producing the value that you know how to produce, and be constantly developing yourself as a person, and ultimately you and yours and the people. If everyone is doing that, then that group will flourish.
Yeah.
And it's going to be, it's going to be a sweet aroma for everyone else. You're going to be setting a good example, and more people are going to be like, yeah, I want to be like that. I want to have a life like that. And if you live out loud so very loudly that you don't really need to say too much of anything, and then you still do have a few people there whose job, who make it their job to articulate what it is that's going on, you can entice people into doing things and getting good results without needing to threaten them in any way. And if people don't actually want to have the results, then then I say don't force them to have the results. People don't need to value the same things that you do. So
that's really important. As you said earlier, the like how your friend's communist, right? Like you can understand by understanding the differences between either how you're raised, your value system. Like as you said, he's very, very empathetic, and you're very empathetic too as well. So I don't know if you said that to point out a difference or something, but maybe he's more feeling oriented or something like that, or things of that nature, to understand why these people have the views they do and why those views should be respected and considered as well. Maybe not forced upon yourself, but I really get into I don't get into it with them, but I'm not like, I don't have fun with the people who really try to like force their worldview onto you, because it's like you're just saying that what's right for you is right for me, and that's just the way it's going to be, and then you're taking away my freedom and kind of giving me this shitty hand, kind of.
Yeah, and taking away other people's autonomy is definitely not the way to go.
No, never.
Yeah,
that is something.
Yeah. No. You don't do that. Andreas has a good point, and I have one word for him: Switzerland. I say that with the utmost sincerity. Switzerland.
That makes sense as well, as it would reflect the values, like the money going.
Yeah, like how much do you care about how much do you care about national defense? Okay, well, apportion your tax money to that. Infrastructure. Yeah. Well, the roads in front of my house are kind of full of potholes. Let's go and let's throw some money that way, right? And you get real-time feedback. You get real-time feedback. And Switzerland is, in many aspects, a very, very good place to live. Yeah, they do. Or at least what they do is they make, for ultra-wealthy people, Andres says they have that, and I'm saying yes, they do. Or at least they make many, sometimes, individual arrangements with ultra-wealthy people where they go and basically decide their own tax plan. Within certain within certain limits, right? You negotiate it, but it's like, okay, 1% of a huge amount is better than 0% of nothing.
Yeah.
and of course I'm not saying it's 1% tax. I'm saying, but I am saying that if you have a considerable enough net worth, Switzerland will negotiate with you.
Yeah, that's a cool idea. I like that.
And it's, yeah, I do too. I mean, of course I would still say that Switzerland might have a little bit too big of a government, but they, overall, I would say, relative to many other places, they don't do a bad job.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
I mean, there are
That's
some
my
things that I don't
ancestor.
agree with, but compared to where I'm at right now, Switzerland does a wonderful job.
Yeah, that's it. That's my ancestors. The name Stutts is Swiss, apparently, from what my family has said. Cool. Yeah, I like that idea though. It's cool.
Oh yeah,
Because you're gonna give the money anyway. You're gonna give a set amount of money to the government from the tax, but having your say of where it
tell them
goes.
what. And the thing is, the attitude in the Swiss government, and this is the biggest thing, the Swiss government workers understand that their heads are always on the chopping block. Because there's so many high net worth individuals that if they leave, their jobs are gone. Dunzo, gone, out.
Mm-hmm.
And so they view themselves as public servants, as opposed to lords.
Oh, I see. Interesting.
And ultimately, I would say that in many situations, the best people to be in, quote, leadership positions, end quote, are the people that can, first off, know when to lead and when to get out of the way. And secondly, when leading, to do so in such a way that they're serving the needs of the people that they are leading, as opposed to doing it from only selfish motivations.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, right? You need to have the selfish motivation and the what is good for everybody else to be pulling in tandem. Because ultimately, if being a good leader isn't going to put bread on the table, then you're going to do something for that. But if the incentive structure is right, if you get rewarded for doing the right thing, then the right thing is going to be a whole lot easier to do than if the reward system runs completely askew and rewards you instead for engaging in corrupt behavior. So ultimately we go back to, okay, so what is the role of government, and what should the reward systems be in place? Payment systems for politicians. How should politicians' salary be figured out? Those are important questions, and we can learn those sorts of things from history too.
Yeah.
It's like, is the maxim, the government is best that governs least, true? I believe it is, and I believe I have the evidence to support it. But if you're not willing to look at all the evidence that everybody else brings to the table, you have no position being at the table to discuss it.
That is super true. Yes. It's really annoying when people don't even consider your... That's literally how we started the stream, was my teacher not having all the evidence and then acting like he's the head of the table and the arbiter of what's right and wrong. And how obviously that like if you're that sort of person that discounts things before they even that inspires like almost like a hatred. Like, I do not hate this guy, right? Because I understand he's just stupid and insecure, and he's like, I don't know. I'm not going to go into anything about him. But
status monkey kind of a thing. He's there clamoring for status and feeling threatened by students that might know more about a subject than he does.
Yeah,
and so he's doing what status monkeys do, which is throw poo and stamp on people that are threats to their status.
exactly.
And if he, you know, if he were actually higher status, if he were actually, you know, strong, he would be okay in sharing the credit, in lifting other people up. And he would actually realize that would benefit him more in the long run anyway, to demonstrate the intellectual humility that it takes to be able to say, yeah, I was wrong.
I was wrong. Exactly. It's a big thing to be able to say that.
It's like words like, I don't know. I was
yeah.
wrong. Words you never hear politicians say, right?
Right,
Words
of course.
Words you never hear micromanaging bosses say. Words you never hear people that you never want to see say.
Yeah, exactly.
Very important words. And I find that I learn most and grow most in situations where I'm kind of forced into saying that. You know, where you're, you know, when I'm in a conversation with somebody that can challenge me, when I'm in a conversation with somebody that does challenge me, or that I can challenge, and that where we are being respectful and going back and forth and can do it without, you know, feeling too threatened. Those are wonderful conversations because we can actually grow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, and in doing that, what that teacher did to me, immature me, like, well, I'm still immature me, but even more immature, even less mature me. Like, for example, I lost respect for this guy on one of the first days, like all of it. You know, I was like, this is like, that is just like so deeply like against my value system. I'm like, this guy no longer. And for example, and I think it's Kantian philosophy where there's like moral agents, right? And there's kind of the basically like I think it's you talk about like the categorical imperative, but there's like and then there's like the people, I forget what it's called, but the people who like have like for example, a dog doesn't have the moral weight human does, right? Like we have like we're in the moral, I think it's called the moral kingdom, it's something.
It's basically the idea that which is closer to us is higher up in that moral hierarchy.
Right, and yes, exactly. So and then there's like people who are basically, if you're in this, it's the kingdom of something. That's what it was something, but whatever. I'm not good with details.
And it's been a long time since I've read it. I think it was
exactly.
2000 and maybe 7 when I last read that particular piece.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. I don't know. I am rusty.
There we go. Perfect examples of what we're saying, but yeah. So it's like the people who are basically deserve like moral respect and to be treated with in a moral way, in a fair way, right? Like, and have this worth that needs to not be infringed upon. Like he, for example, when he did that to the class, in my mind, he was removed from that. At least that's how it felt, and I didn't even know what this was. Like I didn't know this philosophical idea before I was in his class. I learned that in college, but he was removed from that. I did not care. Like I had no consideration for like, so like for example, there was a test, and there was a test that he designed it poorly. The test was poorly designed. He put way too many problems on it. It was going to take 2 days, and we had a substitute teacher. And I was not the only one who did this. There was like 2 other kids who basically, essentially, like there was the substitute teacher who doesn't give a shit, is looking at their phone, and then at the test, I was like, I was like, well, I didn't, I basically finished the test, but there's some answers I could check, so I just took pictures, right? I took pictures of my test, so I was like, well, I can do it. I don't care about this teacher. I don't care about this class. Actually, it's algebra-based physics, and it's just remembering formulas. I'm not like actually hurting myself here. I'm just going to check my answers and make sure I get it right, right? So other kids thought the same idea. 2 others were like, well, there's a substitute teacher here. They don't care if you took a picture of your test right away. They're not going to notice. And then I was with my friend. We were with my friends, and I was like, hey guys, I have pictures. And then someone else was like, oh yeah, we too. So let's work on the problems. It's like, oh, I'm unsure about this one. Oh no, let me explain. This is how it works. So we're all like, the whole class is like discussing the test, right? So obviously that's just like blatant cheating, right? But like I did not like. In my mind, and this is immature. This is of course immature. Like what I did was obviously wrong, but immature me when you're out of it's the kingdom of the ends. I think. Like once you're removed from that, like I was like, well, it doesn't. Like I would never do that with a teacher I liked. Yeah, different rules apply, and in the end, like and obviously kids like cheat all the time, like on subjects like that. I would not do that with a teacher that I respected and liked. And then he was really he somehow figured out that it happened, but he couldn't sort back to who and whatever. He just knew it happened. And he was so upset and so like, oh, and then he was so sanctimonious to us. He's like, I held you guys to a high standard, and and then he explained about what a test says and what a test is and how it communicates to the teacher what the students know. I was like, how can you be so sanctimonious, like, and so come from this, like, basically morally, like, just like lecture us and be so, I was like, when you're like doing these other things and just like, I couldn't take him seriously. In fact, I'm like laughing inside the whole time, which is like, it makes me seem evil almost, this story, right? Like, I just didn't. It didn't matter to me anymore. And again, I'm like a 17-year-old, right? So
yeah. And from the looking at it from a tribalistic perspective, he went from us to them.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, and I have a little different. I have a little different look on the subject than you in that regard. In that I don't cheat.
Right.
That's just something that I never done, and I have probably largely FI based if we're talking about like the Jungian cognitive functions idea of, okay, this is like the bare minimum of how you treat a human being,
right?
And it's of course context dependent, and it has all these if-then statements everywhere, but there's this basic idea of, okay, you treat a human being like this, and there are certain things that that you do and don't do, and I notice that other people draw the line of certain things you do and don't do at a different place than what I do. And consequently, that can result in people treating me very horribly. That can actually come to bite me in the butt, because they'll treat me horribly, and I'll still kind of have this moral obligation, at least according to my code, to still, at least respect them as human beings, even if I can't respect them for anything else that they've said or done.
Right.
Sometimes it works out for me, other times it doesn't. But whether it actually works out for me is immaterial when it comes to actually doing it, because I view doing it as something that is intrinsically good,
right?
And so
for me, it's like I'm slightly different in that things that I like care about.
Mm-hmm.
I do not like. I could not like. I if I care about something and I find it, if it has high worth, then I feel like I have to tread very lightly around it, and I have to be very, very exact, and I have to be morally consistent, and I need to do it no wrong, right? Like this matters a lot, like, but it's like a sliding scale. So like for that, like that one random little physics test,
you can just haphazardly go do whatever you want, because
and especially Like, I wouldn't have done that if it's a teacher I respect. I wouldn't, and not because I think cheating is wrong in that circumstance. I think cheating is pretty much always wrong, but like it's not like super wrong in that like it's not because I don't.
The teacher doesn't make cheating right or wrong, but it makes
right.
it yeah.
Easier to do. Right, exactly. I wouldn't. The reason I wouldn't cheat with a normal teacher is not because I think, oh God, cheating's this horrible thing and I can never do that. It's because it would be, I don't want to do that. That's a teacher I like. That's someone I like. I don't. And first of all, I wasn't a kid who was cheating a lot in school. Like I did it, I think once or twice, and that was one of the times in my whole high school career because I didn't care about the grade I got either. So if I did worse, like that incentive wasn't like cheating wasn't a very big incentive for me. It's like that situation. Most of the incentive was not because I didn't respect him. I wasn't trying to get out. It made it easier that I didn't respect him, and it was just there. Like the chance was there. I was like, hey, I can just do this, and it'll just be like I'm not going to get a consequence for this sort of thing. Like, yeah, I just can. And my brain's like, hey, that's a good idea. Like that's a smart idea, Steven. Like good. It's like, hey, that logically makes sense, and so I did it, right. But normally what would keep me from doing that sort of like having that opportunistic thing are part of because I don't have a huge incentive to cheat on anything. And especially like with other people, like in interaction with other people, like if it's going to infringe upon someone I care, their feelings, that matters a lot to me. Like I cannot insult someone to their face. I cannot do it. Even if it is someone they would have to push me pretty hard for me to really like insult them to their, but like all these variables play into effect with how I operate, right? Like I don't have the consistent like, okay, cheating is awful, I can't do it no matter what. Like circumstances vary in situations and how I am and what I do is largely dependent on my there's a little bit more environmental influence than say you, Matt, right? Like you have this it seems a little bit more internal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And than mine, and I think that's just like a function of mainly of I think a lot of personality. Actually, I think personality is a big play in there. Because like, yeah, I think it's largely personality. And I also have a hatred towards authority, so that like really helps for that sort of thing. Like I don't like authority, and especially when I see authority do things wrong, and then authority, oh God, I don't know. Like what that teacher did that one time, like really deeply affected me. Even if a kid would be like, because if you're an authority, I hold you to a really high standard. And I will reciprocate that standard. If you're doing it correctly, but if you're not, I'm not gonna hold you to some standard anymore. Like I just don't care. So yeah, that and I don't know, 17-year-old me was a little bit more. I also didn't care about there was so many circumstances that pile on to it. Like I really hated school like a lot at that point. I still don't like school, but it was really bad at that point. I felt like it was such a huge waste of my time. So I just didn't care. That was basically it.
I still remember my experience with cheating in school. It was that someone was trying to cheat off of me.
Mm-hmm. Oh, is this the one where you change your?
Yeah.
You do it wrong. Oh yeah.
But I think we might have some new people here, so I'll tell the story again.
Yeah, go ahead.
And it was that there was this guy in my calculus class who clearly didn't know what was going on, and so he thought, well, this guy knows what's going on. I'll just sit next to him during the exam and cheat off of his paper, and that's it. And I discovered that because I knew he didn't know what he was doing, and still he happened to be sitting there next to me and happened to get exactly the same score on the exam that I got, with absolutely not knowing anything. So I just decided on the next exam I was going to pretend like I had no idea what was going on and finished the exam a little more quickly than I usually would have. I mean, normally I was done in 20, 30 minutes, whatever. It didn't take me all the period to do the exam.
Right.
So I went and, took a short exam time, 18, 20 minutes to finish the exam. Then I went off to the bathroom. And I came back, piddled around a little bit, and, after that point, covered the test a little bit. Waited for the other guy to go turn in his test, erased all my stuff, and changed all my wrong answers to right answers. And normally I would take a test with a pen, but this time I took the test with pencil because my intention was to answer all the questions with stupid stuff and then erase it and give all the right answers.
Oh yeah.
And so, things didn't exactly go all that well for him. I decided I would give him a chance, though, to, not get written up for academic misconduct and have it ruin the rest of his life. But the fact of the matter was he wound up getting such horrible grades through the rest of his college career that he didn't really have much of a future anyway. So, I think that, first off, college was maybe not the best point for him. But secondly, and way more importantly, I don't actually think it was because he wasn't intelligent, because he had come up with all sorts of clever ways of cheating. He had come up with all sorts of clever ways of getting around doing work in every aspect. That if he would have spent,
I know kids like that.
If he would have spent half of the effort doing the work that he spent trying to get around the work, he would have been fine. But he just didn't fit into the environment because he was constantly trying to screw other people. He was constantly trying to mess with other people. He was constantly trying to get by with doing the bare minimum. And so I would say almost nowhere that he went would he have ever amounted to much of anything until he built character. And I can only hope that maybe he crashed and burnt at some point, to the point where he didn't permanently hurt himself, but that he ran into enough of a failure, he ran into enough of a problem to cause him to mend his ways.
Right.
Maybe should I have gone in and reported him? Probably. And now that I think about it, maybe ruining his college career would have prevented him from messing something else up. But I thought I would give him another chance, and I knew that he would already get a bad score in the class and have to retake it. Because if 2 out of 4 exams or whatever you screw up, and one of them you effectually get a 0. I gave him a couple mercy points here and there, but that was about it. There's no way.
I would not have given him.
Well,
I would have just 0% test.
Well, but it was more like salt in the wound kind of mercy points.
Right. Okay.
I actually did it for the purpose of rubbing salt in the wound. I was actually vindictive, very, very bad.
Okay, so it's like him, oh crap, he gave me these points. Like he's taunting me almost.
Yeah,
hey,
and then I just pretended to be completely oblivious of the whole situation the next time he saw me. The thing is, he was about ready to level me. This dude actually wanted to, he wanted to beat me senseless. The next time he saw me, it was kind of funny. It's like, why in the world would you beat me senseless?
Right.
Did you somehow deserve a good grade for?
Right. You don't just, it's entitlement there almost. But it is.
That doesn't make you deserve a good grade.
On the other hand, also for me, I'm thinking about in school, people cheated off me all the time and I didn't care. I did not care about school, so I'd let my friends cheat off me. I would, if they didn't know an answer, but oh yeah, sure, if you want it.
I would give people, I would give people my summaries of lectures, and I would teach anybody that asked me to. I would never do anybody's homework for them, but I would help them with
No.
it, and sit there with a book or something and answer people's questions as they would work on an assignment. I would do that all the time.
I noticed that me like being very open and like helpful. Like I did teach people as well. Like I tutored people, and I did that completely. Like that I helped. Like if someone asked me to like explain something to them, I treated it so seriously. That mattered. Like that's something I'm gonna be like I care. But like that generated goodwill. So like frivolous homework that you need to do, like people would just give me their answers. They'd be like, "Oh, you want the answers here? Here they are. Here are the answers because you've helped me out here. So, and I know you don't need to do this stupid homework. Like you obviously understand this stuff because you're acing every test. Here you go." And I was like, "Oh, thank you. I didn't want to do that. I was just going to take a 0 on it, but now my grade might be better because of you. Thank you."
Yeah.
But then again, that's high school, so it's literally high school. It's a little bit a different situation.
Whereas I wouldn't do that, and I would actually very much frown upon that behavior. I still, to some extent, find it understandable. Like I can understand. Like I don't think that you would have lost anything by not doing the homework.
No, exactly.
But at the same time, I'm never ever going to tell people to do what you did.
No, for sure not. Because it's just bad advice all around. Like it can't be a net positive, right? Like it really can't be a net positive. Maybe there's a circumstance, but I'm not gonna like do the mental gymnastics to try to find that circumstance. Basically like either like someone copying off of someone like or someone getting their homework answers for free. That there's no way that will benefit them. It can actually hurt them, or it can do nothing. Like in my case, it did nothing, so it was kind of a neutral thing. So giving that advice to someone is at best giving them neutral advice. In which case you just give them no advice, and that's neutral advice. So why would you say it to someone, right? Like, it can only hurt them or not. So like, yeah, it makes complete sense. I would never tell someone to do that. Now I would do that in circumstances, but I would never tell someone to do it. It's bad advice. It just is. But I mean, unless you're in a time crunch and you really have something else that you need to do, and it's way more important than that thing, then it might be good to do that. But that's okay. So that maybe not mental gymnastics, but
that's why I advocate for a completely different kind of a system too.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's a very simple thing, and I've stated it before on stream, and it's very, very basic, and it's what my dad said he would do if ever he wound up being a high school teacher or a teacher of any kind. You get to set your own grading scheme.
Yeah.
The final exam is worth a minimum of 30%. Basically, like, you have either 100 or 1,000 points, and the final is worth a minimum of 30 and a maximum of 100. The final can be 100% of your grade. Then you have like homeworks, attendance, and quizzes. And the rule is you can take any assignment that you want, but especially the final exam. So I think it was any test you can take at any time. At the final exam, you can definitely take it any time. And if you take the final exam and you have it be 100% of your score, whatever, or you finish 100% of your class credits, which means you have to finish the final, you're done. You don't have to ever show up to class again. That's it. You're done. If you want to have like attendance points to make it easier to kind of inflate your grade, if you want to have more homework, if you want to have all these different things, if you want to, like, homework, you can work with other people, you can collaborate, you can get that to be, like, what, you take your final, have that be worth 30% and homework be worth 70. Well, I guess you're going to be doing all the homeworks then. Or if you want the final to be 30, homework to be 50, and attendance to be 20. And attendance would have a maximum of 20%, right? And attendance means actually participating in class and whatever. You do that, but you get to decide what you get graded on, with the caveat that at least 30% of it's going to be the final exam. And once
that's wonderful. Yeah.
And if you do that, then that would mean, okay, what in the world is the incentive of me sitting around wasting time copying homework? If I already know the stuff, then why don't I just go study it all over the weekend or whatever, just to make sure that I know it? Like, I've learned all this stuff before. If I've learned it before, then I'll just go and review the material to make sure there's no glaring mistakes over the course of this next weekend. And on Monday of week 2 of the class, I go, teacher, I'd like to take the final. Okay, please step into the hallway. I'll bring your desk. Here's the paper. Here's a pencil. Go. And then you take the test. You give the test back, and you never set foot in the classroom again.
There you go. I'd love a system like that.
I'm thinking if my dad were your math teacher,
yeah, we get along.
I'm pretty sure he'd be your favorite teacher.
Oh yeah.
Be like, yeah, he was my favorite teacher. I attended 2 days of class. One was the first day, and then one was the Monday after that, and then I never saw him again until the next class, in which I did the exact same thing. Collected the syllabus and...
Yeah, there you go.
No, but if that doesn't work for you, then you don't have to do it that way, but you get to decide.
Right.
As the learner.
You get to figure out what you think would work for you. Who would have thought? And such an, what an unintuitive idea, right? Like, that is. Like, come on. Like, who cannot see, like, how great a system that would be? Like,
yeah. And if you're not gutsy enough to go and say, okay, 100% of my grade will be the final, then you don't have to be gutsy enough to do that.
Yeah.
It depends on what you value. And if you decide, okay, 100% of it's the final and I bomb it, well, guess what I'm going to be doing next year? I'm going to be taking the course again. Or I can just go re-enroll in the course. If I take the final week 2, bomb it, then it's like, well, okay, I could have this on my transcript as a failure and have to get it erased by taking it again, and then maybe I can negotiate with the teacher like, okay, can I have a redo?
Yeah, I'm sure a teacher would be like, okay.
Like, okay, I'm writing a different final, and this is going to be the final for the next people, and you're going to write you are going to write an affidavit saying I'm not going to reveal the contents of this final exam to the next year of students, or this will just be one for you.
Right.
But if you reveal the contents of this test to anybody, don't ever expect to get into any college anywhere. Don't expect to get into any workplace. You will get the absolute worst recommendations. You will get ejected.
Yeah.
The book will get thrown at you if you screw up this opportunity. But the fact of the matter is, if you take it in good faith and you go with it, which I'm assuming, I know you would. Like, you would take it in good faith, and you wouldn't go and share the answers with anybody else.
No, hell no, I would not share those answers. Yeah, no. Like, there's the thing is, I would let people cheat off me on like stupid little homework things. On like a final, no, I would not let that happen. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna let you salvage your grade here. Like, this is where it actually matters. Like, this is like, no. But yeah, you can copy my answers on some stupid little homework assignment. Like
that you could easily go and go to the Wolfram Alpha math website and find out the answer there.
Yeah, exactly. You're just gonna find it somewhere else. Right, exactly. But no, when it starts to matter, that's when like. The more the more a certain test matters to your to your academic career, the like I'm not gonna let you can't cheat on that. Like, no.
No, you can't do that.
I'm not. I don't want that. Yeah. Or if you do, you're gonna have to pay me a lot. I want money out of it.
It's like what is this grade worth to you?
You're getting too much value for me to not be getting something out of it, right? Like, how
much is a year of your life worth? Are you going to pay me $4,500 for this test?
Yeah, it's like, oh, there you go. I'll let you. I'll write my answers in such thick black, ink that you could see it from from
across the room.
Yeah, there you go. But no, like. That's literally what it would take, would be a monetary incentive. Like, I'm not going to let you cheat for nothing. Or if like for example, I had this guy. So there was the AP exam. So I had it like a B- in English senior year, but we would have AP practice tests, right? And so again, I hated school, and I felt like I had to like make my own interest in it. Like I had to make it fun for me in some way, right? Like I thought it was funny. I thought it'd be funny if I just got the top score on the AP practice exams while I have a D- in the class. I thought that'd be funny. I was like, that's pretty. Like it's like I wonder what the teacher's gonna how are they gonna react like to this, getting the top score on every single AP practice test, having the lowest grade in the class. It's kind of like an oxymoron, and so I wasn't like I saw him trying. He didn't want to do it. I saw him trying to cheat. Like I'm hiding my answers. Like I'm not gonna let you cheat. Like
so he knew that. So he knew that even though you had a D- in the class, that you were going to completely destroy the exam.
Yes, yeah, he was aware. He's like, yeah, Steven's gonna do amazingly. I need to. Yes, yeah. He was completely aware of that. And so yeah, he would try. I saw him trying. And I shielded. Not I wasn't super overt, but
I mean, you just
made it so where it would be hard for him to do that, basically.
Yeah, it's like where you have the paper, you have the paper or whatever. Like you have your paper here on the table, and then you just kind of lean over it, and then you.
Yeah, exactly.
You're right there, like you have this arm shielding from there, this arm shielding from the rest of the perspective. Then if the person leans over to look over your shoulder, you punch him in the nose.
Yeah, there you go. And you focus. You look like you're focusing really hard on it, so that's why you're so hunched over.
That's why you're so hunched over, is because you're focused so hard, but you're really just hiding your answers.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Precisely. Works perfectly.
And then if you actually want someone to cheat off of you, like that dork face that tried to cheat off of, what you do is you do that, but to a little bit lesser extent. Like you make it so they have to work for it a little bit. Like you.
Yeah.
Like you put your arm right here, but you don't like hunch over. You don't do this to the point where where this part of your arm is getting in the way. You like have this part of your arm be out of the way so they can still see over your arm, and you don't punch him over the nose when he tries to.
You make it really, You make it
so he has to work a little bit, so he realizes, oh boy, he's actually trying to hide his paper a little bit.
Right, exactly.
Like everyone knows that this is how you hide your paper. If you're left-handed, or if you're right-handed, then you hide it with your left hand. If you're left-handed, you hide it with your right hand. But if you don't go, and make it completely impossible, because obviously you want the dork to copy off of you and get a 0 on the test, or get a low score on the test.
Yeah. You entice them, It's like, hey, look how hard I'm trying to stop people from cheating on me. Oh no, you can still do it. You're so clever. You got through my guard.
Oh boy.
Wow. Exactly. What a wonderful time that is. But
it's horrible. And it's like the mercy points they were an afterthought. It's like, well, wouldn't this be even just even worse? It'd be like, I have you so wrapped around my finger, I can give you mercy points if I like.
Right.
I mean,
exactly.
that was satisfying. That was the most satisfying test I've ever taken. Except maybe taking the MCAT when I had horrible diarrhea and still scoring the 99th point whatever percentile I scored in.
Mm-hmm.
That was also fun. Like I literally wrote one of my essays about needing to go to the bathroom. I took this dates me. This shows how old I am, or how long ago I took the MCAT. I took the MCAT back when you had to write essays, and one of my essays was about how I had to go to the bathroom. And I got the second highest score that you could on essays. I guarantee you, the guy was just there laughing. He's like, "What in the world is this guy writing about?"
The grader's having a fun time. Oh my god. That's hilarious.
And then I talked about I talked about bees in my other essay.
Oh, that reminds me of one of my EOC essays, where I talked about how horrible the question was, like the premise. That was my essay, was deconstructing how bad, whoever designed this test, how badly they messed up and why they messed up and everything. And it was one of the longer essays I've ever written. out of all the essays, like I spent a lot of time deconstructing, and I'm like, you need to. I think I went as far to say you need to reconsider who you have designing the questions and make sure they know what they're doing. Like that was so satisfying to write. And I didn't get any feedback on that EOC. Really, I think this was an EOC where our scores weren't released and stuff like that. It was just feedback. It was literally feedback for the school. It's supposed to like. I think they might have like kind of discounted because it's supposed to give feedback to the state, about how what students.
It's like, oh, we accidentally lost this student's exam. Oops.
Couldn't find that one. I was like, oh my god, because the whole premise was us analyzing an argument that wasn't there. There was no argument. It was evidence for one side. And
okay, so this made its way into the mail pile, and somehow this one made it into the pile of papers that get thrown into the incinerator. How in the world did that happen?
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah, I wonder how. Oh my god.
Oh, that's horrible.
It's really fun to write, though.
I'll bet. Well, on that lovely note, we've been streaming for well over 3 hours now, and so I'm going to thank all of our viewers for tuning in, and thank everyone else who is watching this after the fact. Thank you especially, Stephen, for showing up.
Yeah.
This is always a pleasure to be to be able to have this back and forth and to talk about sometimes these crazy things that we've been doing.
Yes, that we've been through. Yeah. Oh my god.
Oh boy. And welcome to our next stream, which will be held Eastern time, like Eastern Daylight. I think it's still Eastern Daylight time on Monday. So tomorrow at 9 p.m. or in Eastern European time. I'm sorry, 9:30 p.m. or Eastern European time, 4:30 a.m. or whatever other time you happen to be around. I'll be swigging on coffee. We'll be reading the Iliad. An essay about diarrhea. It was almost that bad. It really was almost that bad. It wasn't even about diarrhea so much as it was about having to go to the bathroom. It's like I described in crappy detail exactly how it's just like that one experience that you have when you're like cleansing down, and because it was the MCAT, I used all of the proper anatomical terms, the external anal sphincter and so on. It was just
oh my god.
And I was actually able to relate the topic of the essay to what happens when you get food poisoning and you're in the middle of something important, and all you can do is go to the bathroom and feel like you're going to die. It was an urge which is destined to erupt from deep within. Oh boy! Oh man, I whacked my head up against the wall. Oh no! This is just.
Oh my god.
Oh, that was bad. That was so bad. Oh, Andrew, thank you for that. On that note, we'll see you guys later. Have a good evening, night, afternoon, morning, whatever time it happens to be for you. Bye.